Oh, yeah. Oh, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Normal America Show. Host Rob Nor. I'm back, baby. I'm home. Woo! Nice to be home. Sitting in my comfy chair in my modest studio with my moderately attractive good looks. It is wonderful to be here. I'm glad to be here this fine day. I hope you're all having a fantastic day as well. Still getting used to my setup, my StreamYard setup here, but I'm getting more comfortable with it. I didn't mention with the last show I did with Grid Motorsports, there are little technical issues at the beginning of that, but I think I got that worked out and I'm getting better. We're going to do some good work getting some banners, stuff like that set up. I know some of my friend Sparky's in the chat here. He mentioned that he might be able to help me out with some of that stuff as well. Nico Pluto, look at this guy coming in hot early with the membership. Hello, he says. Hello. Hello, Nico. This is one of my favorite Seinfeld jokes. Uncle Leo. Hello, Jerry. You still say hello? This is good stuff. Good stuff. We're going to have a great stream today. I think I got it figured out where I'm on Rumble, I'm on X, I'm on YouTube. 3 platforms that recently haven't been screwing me over. Screw Twitch. If you haven't really been following any of that garbage, Connor comes on my stream and decides to shout homophobic slurs and gets a 7-day ban, and I get a 30-day ban for it. Whatever. So let that lefty cesspool continue to be a lefty cesspool. I gotta be honest, I've been very busy today, so I didn't have much time to put together a show. It'd be a great night for some lefty to call in and get wrecked. Love it. Maybe we could chum one in if one could figure out how to use Discord or a cell phone or all that good stuff that they always claim. Now, I just had to look down to make sure that my mic's not muted because like the last few shows, how do you talk about violence after January 6th? Tell you what, HN, why don't you call in and we'll talk about how I could talk about left-wing violence after January 6th. How's that sound? We could have that conversation. You seem to be someone who likes sort of, especially when I'm at work and I can't take call-ins, someone who likes to disagree with me, so we'll give you a chance. Open platform. You can have your answer to my question and talk about how despicable January 6th was, and how dare a right winger ever talk about political violence again after the horrors of January 6th, right? You call in, we talk about it. How's that sound? Nonetheless, as we wait for him to give an excuse for why he won't be calling in, um, it was an interesting day. My job is 95% of the time I love my job, but there are 5% of the time where it's not a good job. It doesn't pay very much, for one. Secondly, I work an insane amount of hours. But anytime you're doing healthcare, you have to expect this, right? And it's no different with adults with disability. For example, in the healthcare field, heck, even if you're just a visiting nurse or whatever, if someone's very sick, maybe you're dealing with bodily fluids and things of that nature, that's not a really fun day. Or there's certain times that it isn't fun where it's like you're going through a normal state licensing or auditing procedure. And so you got to do a bunch of paperwork and stuff like that. Things of that nature. So today was one of those days where it was just not a good, fun day at work. It just really wasn't. In addition to that, my back's sort of, why do I always read your comments in such a mocking tone? Because I feel like it? How does that sound? I noticed you didn't say if you're going to accept my offer to call in. So you might not like the tone of which I'm speaking, but you could certainly call in and use the tone that you would like yourself. Anyways, I had a lot of cleaning to do at work today and just did not sit right with the back. So a little back twisted up today here. Furniture coming tomorrow. We have furniture people that are bringing it. So I won't have to be doing any lifting or anything like that. I think the expectation is you got furniture people coming. It's going to be like these burly guys, right? But I'm holding out hope. Maybe it'll be some burly ladies. I could then tell Andrew Wilson and company, like, see? Some sissy like me needed some strong ladies to come throw the couch in the house. So, but I bet it'll be guys. Just a hunch. Oh, you're still working until 6 p.m. On the clock, chatting to me. Tisk tisk. Well, at least you're working. We'll take your word for it. Let me know if my tone goes awry again and you have to criticize it, right? So, sort of rough day at work. I finally get home. Let's do a little Rob's complaining corner. We'll get a graphic set up for this. There we go. And a little tune. Ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. Rob's complaining corner. So, I know everyone has refrigerators, and on the top of your refrigerator is a freezer. And some people even have deep freezes. It's very common where I live because that's where you store your venison and everything. Down in the basement, you got a big freezer, and that's, you get your venison processed, you store it there, and then all year you're good to go, right? But I also, because I don't have a fancy pants fridge because I'm not like wealthy, I just got a normal refrigerator. So I have an ice machine. I'm a big proponent of the ice machine. Like to have some ice cubes, sometimes diet soda, something else of that nature. A nice lemonade, perhaps, an iced tea. I like ice in my beverage. I don't think that's a crime. So we had this ice cube machine when we first moved into this house. It lasted like 3 years, right? Then it broke down finally. Okay, no problem. We've had trouble with every ice machine we've had since then. We ordered this one model. It came, it didn't work. We sent it back. They sent us a new one. It didn't work. So we took it apart. It turned out to be like the pump. It worked for like 2 months. Didn't work anymore because I took it apart. They weren't going to send another one. Great. So then we just went out and bought a new ice machine. We've had it for like a month. For dinner, try to sit down and have a nice diet soda with some ice, and the ice machine's not working. And I told my wife, I'm probably the only guy in town whose wife will not provide them with a glass of ice upon request. What? Isn't that implicit in the deal of marriage? I go work at my job 80 hours a week. I come home, I get a glass of ice. I'm not even like drinking whiskey or anything out of it. I want my ice machine. See, our freezer's filled, so there's not a lot of room for an ice tray, but it looks like that's the direction I'm heading. So I told my wife, she's like, what are you going to stream about tonight? I was like, the ice machine. It's going to be 2 hours of ice machine. That's what we're talking about tonight. Strap in, folks. Tired of these damn ice machines. Is it Trump's tariffs' fault? Maybe. We don't know. Whoever's going to, Pete Buttigieg or Gavin Newsom, if they're running in 2028 and they could promise to get me a ice machine that reliably works, maybe they'll have my vote. We do have a little bit of hard water. It's not terrible, though. But there you go. HN calling her get to work. So that's my grievance of the day, the stupid ice machine. Also, completely different grievance. I'll save it for another day. But I don't care. I'll say, don't you hate when you have to call a place and now it's automated for you're just looking to talk to a person at like a pharmacy and you're just calling to be like, hey, is my prescription in? But instead they'll be like, thank you for calling blah, blah, blah pharmacy. For English, press 1. Please listen carefully. The choices may have changed. If you're looking to, and then there's always 7 options before it gets to I just want to talk to a person. That's it. I hate that. It's just, why isn't that option 1? Because they know everyone's going to click that. So, there's another. There used to be, and then there's another complaint I had when I used to debate in college. The soda machine that you could get Gatorade and soda and cold water that was in the college building that I was in. We would be there till 2, 3, 4 in the morning, sometimes working on debate. And so I would frequent that soda machine in the wee hours of the night. And this was before you could swipe your card. So you would have to put, and some of the machines now you could see in, so you could see how many sodas are left or whatever. But this was the old fashioned one where you just hit the button, and so you'd put your $2 in or whatever. And if you hit a button that it was out, it would, instead of just saying, try another, the message was a minute. It would be sold out. Please try to choose another selection. But it would go real slow. And you have to sit there for a minute before it would spit your money back out or you could choose another. That's time a-wasting, my friends. So there you go. All right, well, thanks for tuning in. Now, we'll talk politics. So first off, first thing to say today, since I'm ill-prepared for the show, I would love to wreck some lefties that disagree with me tonight. Or I guess righties, whatever floats your boat. So if you hear anything that I'm talking about that you disagree, please let me know and we'll be happy to bring you on. I know that I'm a big bad guy when it comes to when I'm not at home streaming and I'm streaming on my phone. And I don't know how to take call-ins while I'm streaming on my phone. And I'm just a terrible guy that's running from everyone's questions. Even though I think probably more than any other streamer I've ever seen, I'm willing to take on all debate comers, including random people from the channel all the time. So here's your chance, those of you that think that I'm a bad guy that's running from questions or whatever. A lot of big talkers in the comments on my short YouTube videos. A lot of big talkers saying I'm not reading their comments and stuff like that. So here's your chance. We'll put the old Discord link out there. You can hop right in and give me a piece of your mind. How's that sound? Because I'm an idiot and this and that and the other. So that's number 1. Number 2, a lot of random smaller things to talk about today. I thought I'd start with this point that I made a short video on the other day, and that's about violence coming from left-wingers and how I predict it to increase. So there is truth to sort of this thing that you heard people say all the time. We'll talk about that in a second, Legion Gaming. I did not see this particular incident, but this is sort of where we're going. Legion Gaming, thank you for being a member for 3 months, says, did you see the lady that made the Tesla hit site? I've not seen that. I haven't seen that, but that's sort of what we're talking about. You would hear this claim all the time when it was left-wing violence. Well, violence is the language of the unheard. And there's some truth to that. Generally, if you have access to the levers of power, you're less likely to use extreme measures. Now, let's talk about January 6th for a minute. One of the reasons the Democrats would never really need a January 6th type event is because if they want to have a coup to overthrow the government, they don't have to rely on people on the Capitol ground to yell and scream about something. Everybody knows that's not an actual coup. It's not actually going to do anything to really change the government whatsoever. Instead, what you do is, I don't know, let's just come up with a hypothetical. Theoretically, you could concoct a scheme claiming that your opponent was working with a foreign country to get dirt. And the way you concoct it is by working with a foreign country to get dirt. And then you give the dirt that you bought and paid for to the FBI, who then uses it to spy on your opponent, leak to the press for 4 years, start impeachment proceedings, special counsel, et cetera, et cetera. You know, that's the kind of stuff that can actually grind an administration to a halt. Oh, right, like the Democrats. That's what they do. That's what they do. Or they use lawfare, judge shopping. That's how it occurs. HN, remember, you had your chance to call in, but you can't because you're busy working. Well, I can't believe he's saying this right now. What kind of job you have? Seem to be quite a long time to type. That's like an actual attempted overthrow of a government. Chronicle Lives, thank you so much for $2. Says, kick ass, Rob. Did I read that right with the explanation? I hope so. Thank you. January 6th, there were actions that were violent. Those people deserve to be punished. But one, if we ever get to the truth, we'll find out that this was all but set up by people that actively encouraged there not to be adequate security there. Therefore, to get the photo op and the excuse they needed to go after Trump people in the first place, which was what this was. And secondly, it certainly wasn't a serious attempt to overthrow the government. It never stood a chance. But it was an act of right-wing violence. After we saw an entire summer of left-wing violence that was all but praised or excuses made for. So much so that the vice president and then Democrat candidate that was installed, by the way, no one voted for, candidate for president, actually put a bail fund out that actually did real damage, not just stealing a lectern, but things like burning down police precincts, injuring hundreds of officers around the country in their movement, 40-something deaths that resulted from their movement, unlike the 0 people that January 6th killed. It was all January 6ers that died. Where was the condemnations? Where were the mass arrests? I saw Wick saying this the other day. He was talking to my buddy Drone Tech. Unlike you, I'm against violence on any side. Really? Did you call out the FBI and the Democrats for not actively pushing for serious investigations into the Black Lives Matter and Antifa violence that almost all got a slap on the wrist? Did you call that out? That's the truth. They relied on a two-tiered system to overly prosecute one side and under prosecute the other, and then they say, we're fine with whatever happens. But the truth is that those groups like Black Lives Matter, Antifa, etc., they were always close to the levers of power. And so they didn't need the violence. The violence was the point. The violence was them being brown shirts for people in the establishment. They liked the violence. Let's go way back to 2016. Do you remember when you had all of these Bernie supporters that were acting a fool, like screaming at rallies? And this was back when you first started to hear, in a serious note, like things like the Proud Boys, because you had groups like Patriot Prayer in Seattle that would march, or in Portland that would march. They'd get permits, they'd march, and then Antifa would show up with weapons and like beat the piss out of them. So then you had the Proud Boys that would say, screw that, we're going to go and we're going to fight with Antifa. And then the Proud Boys were considered terrorists, not Antifa. It was cool for them to show up and beat the shit out of peaceful protesters. But when the other group decided, well, we're going to fight back against them, now that's too much. Now, I think a lot of the Proud Boys were LARPers that were actively looking for violence, and that was stupid. And if they engaged in violence and got caught, hey, that's the law. Sorry about your luck. But the idea that Antifa is just an idea, it's not that. Remember, that was the official story of the FBI. It's just an idea. I mean, yeah, they got all this funding and they seem to be organized, and you could actually go to their websites like Rose City Antifa, but it's just an idea. It's not an organization. That's what our FBI said, as all of this violence was occurring. And so there was disruptions and violence and things of that nature. And the Democrats either ignored it or they said it was peaceful or it was legitimate. And then remember, at the DNC convention, a bunch of Bernie supporters were rightfully pissed off that they felt that Bernie had been screwed over in the primary. So what happened? They decided to go to the DNC convention outside it and act a fool, burning American flags, shouting, screaming, shoving, all that good stuff. Then all of a sudden you saw Democrats like Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and you saw, what's her name? Sarah Silverman was on stage. This is ridiculous. This is childish. This needs to stop. You see, when it was geared towards their opponents, when it was geared towards Republicans or MAGA type people like Patriot Prayer or Trump supporters, then it was all groovy. It was free speech. Great. Awesome. But as soon as it turned on them, they were like, this is unacceptable. Rand Paul gets the shit beat out of him by his neighbor. Yuck, yuck. If that happens to a Democrat politician, I'll guarantee the left will lose their mind. It was stochastic terrorism. Fox News led to this. Elon gets harassed. J.D. Vance gets harassed with his kids. Maxine Waters says to chase Republicans out of public spaces. Yuck, yuck. They're targeting Tesla. Oh, he deserves it. Remember when the Dobbs decision was released early? By the way, did we ever find out who that leaker was at the Supreme Court? No? No? Want to talk about judicial crisis? Someone leaked that decision so that their jackboots could go intimidate the jurist or the justices in an attempt to intimidate them to overturn it. Then there was an assassination attempt on Kavanaugh's life. That was all gravy. Even though Chuck Schumer, the head of the Democrats, said Kavanaugh personally would reap the whirlwind and he would get what was coming to him. Then there was an assassination attempt on Kavanaugh. That wasn't the Democrats' fault, though, was it? But Trump saying fight like hell, that was a call to violence. Now, why do I bring this all up? Well, we see now the aforementioned J.D. Vance business, the Tesla. It's not just Tesla companies being attacked. We have people bragging in that while these attacks are occurring. Oh, by the way, here's my website that I've created targeting Tesla. Then we have individual, just Joe Schmo, regular people that happen to drive Tesla, their cars being vandalized. And it's all a big joke for the Democrats. J.D. Vance being harassed. Hell, let's go back. Do you remember? I remember vividly an incident where Tucker Carlson was live on television when he was still on Fox News, and Antifa attacked his house. His wife had to hide in a closet while she was on the phone with police. No big deal. Imagine that was Jake Tapper or Rachel Maddow, what the story would have been. But it's all groovy. No big deal. And all those prior incidents occurred while basically the left at least had people in positions of power that were claiming to support them or pay lip service to them. Look at all the violence we saw under Black Lives Matter. And yet institutionally, every single institution of cultural or political relevance, sans a few right-wing ones, backed up their message. Violence is the language of unheard. You couldn't turn on Call of Duty without messages about Black Lives Matter. You couldn't watch an NFL game. You couldn't watch a late night comedy show What do you mean unheard? I spent the entire summer of love, the George Floyd, doing panel after panel after panel, telling these lefties, you are aware that if this is the new rules, if you set these rules, it's okay for Antifa to come to beat the shit out of Republicans when they're marching. It's okay for all this looting and violence we see. It's mostly peaceful. You're just picking bad apples. Remember, this was all occurring at the exact same time that they were telling the rest of us that we were non-essential and shouldn't leave the house. Remember? And of course, my prediction came true. I said the first time that there is violence on the other side, you people will lose your minds and you'll say, oh my God, this is the biggest deal ever. Then you see run-of-the-mill NPC lefties like HN in the chat, even before we start tonight's show, saying, oh, January 6th, how could you ever talk about left-wing violence? January 6th. I still remember where I was. I remember January 6th. I was on my cuck chair watching my wife's bull plow the shit out of her, and I remember checking my phone and being so sad. I was so sad when I saw what was happening January 6th. Here were all these noble law enforcement officers that I spent all summer protesting and saying that they needed to die and we needed to defund and fire all of them, and now they were under attack. It was the saddest day of my life. I barely could finish as I was watching that dude plow my wife. It was so sad. We know, HN. What a terrible, terrible day it must have been for you. I know. It must have been very difficult. You're unhinged, Rob, issuing personal insults because you disagree with someone is disgusting. I know. It's terrible. Hey, HN, did you know that I'm not forcing you to watch this? You could hit the fucking road? No? Oh, much like you probably like watching dudes plow your lady, you like this punishment too, huh? HN's probably a dude that's like, hey, it's just protests when they're going after Elon and Tesla and JD Vance, huh? But oh, I'm really hurt by Rob's joke here. It's gone too far. I can't believe this is how you treat fans. There's the door, my friend. It's metaphorical, of course, but. So, as you told these lefties, that's the reaction you're going to have when we finally see right-wing violence. No, we wouldn't be like that. Then, of course, that's exactly what they did. So much so that that's still what they're talking about. That's it. We could see 500 left-wing protests. They could assassinate Trump. They could assassinate Elon. They could literally take pitchforks and torches to the Capitol and burn it to the ground, and still, what the Democrats would be saying, yeah, but January 6th, remember January 6th? Remember that? So you tried to warn people, because I didn't want to see the violence. Just like I tried to warn them when I said, look, you go back and watch all this. All my live streams, most of them are still up. I had to remove some because YouTube decided to censor me. But they should all be on Odyssey or Rumble, if not YouTube. Go back and watch. Those panels I was on where I was warning about this. Here's another thing I warned of. I said, here's what's going to happen. You're going to celebrate basically allowing these riots to go. And the police and these Democrat mayors are just going to let them go. And then eventually what's going to happen is, just like with the Rodney King riots and the Korean community, people are going to say, you know what, enough's enough. We're going to bring guns and we're going to take care of it ourselves. And I don't want to see Americans shooting at other Americans. I don't want to see that. So I would like for law enforcement to step in, and if they aren't allowed or won't, then the National Guard to step in. That's what I would like to see. And everyone said, you're crazy, you're an authoritarian. Then we had the Rittenhouse situation. And what happened? 95% of the people on the left said, Rittenhouse is a murderer. He shouldn't have been there. He knew what he was doing. He brought a gun. That's outrageous. You even had left-wing streamers like Vosh saying, Rittenhouse should have sat there and allowed himself to be beaten, perhaps to death. That was his duty. He was not allowed to defend himself. HN, you apologizing for calling me a smooth brain? I don't mind at all if you called me a smooth brain. I didn't see it anyways. So all of it occurred. January 6th stuff occurred. But what I said, the other thing that I said, and it's going to bear out, I said the left is committing this violence while they basically are close to access to levers of power. What do you think will happen if they lose that? Then what happens? What do you think happens? Because there's going to be this time period where the left thinks that things will continue to operate in the paradigm that it always has. Now, let me be clear when I say left. I don't mean everyone. HN sounds like a fucking idiot, but I don't see any evidence that he's out there calling for violence or doing violence or any shit like that, right? And there's certainly disparate groups on the left as anywhere else. But what I'm talking about is those that have excused, celebrated, or engaged in acts of violence previously. They're going to think that it's the same paradigm. That it's like, oh, we basically get away with it. If we have a violent riot and violent looting session, a handful of us will get caught and we'll be given slaps on the wrist. Remember those two lawyers in New York that firebombed a police car? What'd they end up getting, like 3 months, 6 months? Something like that? They assume that's the paradigm that will continue. And they're right to assume that. Because that's just how far our justice system's fallen. In these left-wing areas, the truth is, the politicians, the prosecutors, the judges, they might not come right out and say it, but they're just fine with this act of violence, intimidation, and sort of political terrorism as long as it's directed at the right people. Directed at those Trump people, that's fine. Well, we don't really want them to attack you, but if you're afraid of it, and so therefore... Check something here. So what will happen if that changes? What if all of a sudden there's a Department of Justice that says, you know what? We're going to treat attacks on Tesla businesses like an act of terrorism, which is what it is. It is designed to use violence and intimidation for political reasons. That's what it is. It's a political protest using violence. It's terrorism. Once they start to realize, we don't have access to those levers of power anymore, so we're going to go to our default, which is violence, intimidation. Oh, now we're being charged with it? They're going to lose their shit. And we're going to see more acts of violence. They might not be as overt as let's all go loot that Target, though those things will happen. But it'll be shit like swatting. There will be Luigi Mangione assassination-esque attempts or violence against figures that they don't like. They're going to become more desperate. You could see it. Go back and watch sort of the avatar with the left-wingers that I deal with. Of all the left-wingers that I've dealt with, the online streaming community, who would you say is their big boss? Who's the one that most of them look to? If you had to say, who would you think it would be? Yeah, de Blasio's daughter got in trouble. Yeah, Flimtalk's right. It would be Destiny. Go watch Destiny's crash out after the first assassination attempt at Trump. You could see it. That's why I talked about it. And again, I hate to go back to that, but if you go back and look, I didn't enjoy streaming for that following week or 2 weeks. You see, I could sit here and pick on HN. I know he's soft, apparently, and I harmed his feels. Sorry about that, I guess. Not really sorry, actually. But I ain't going to do anything to harm him in real life. I don't wish anything but the best for him and all the other lefties that I talk to. I really don't. I don't have it in me. I'll sit here. I'll make fun of people if I feel it's necessary. I try to keep the show entertaining. I certainly advocate for my positions in an aggressive style many times, but I don't wish ill on pretty much anyone. And I think that's been backed up by the thousands upon thousands of hours that people could see of me. And I like to feel that that thought's reciprocated, that the person I'm debating that says, you're an effing idiot, like Connor. I think Connor sucks. I think he's a sellout grifter. But I don't think Connor, wants me to lose my channel. That's why I defended him. People are like, oh, he purposely used homophobic slurs so he knew it would get you banned on Twitch. I don't think that's what he did. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that's what he did. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. I don't think Connor wants my relationship with my wife to fall apart or me to lose my job or me to be physically attacked or any shit like that. I don't want to deal with people that I think would resort to using violence against me or violence against the candidates that I'm voting for. And that was the problem with Destiny, particularly when he told Pisco, when Pisco said, did you want that bullet to kill Trump? And he's like, I don't know what I could say because of terms of service. Well, the worst thing that could happen would be him to be shot at and not killed. For the bullet to miss. What did I say that week? I was like, this is a guy that's spiraling. And if you go to his Reddit channel, just like if you go to Reddit right now, it doesn't have to be his channel. Go anywhere in Reddit. They're becoming unhinged. They're really unhinged. Like they're really whipping themselves into a frenzy that Trump and Elon are literal Nazis. And this is just like the Third Reich. And we got to stop them now before they get power. And people that are more mainstream and prominent voices, like people at CNN or the Lincoln Project, etc., they're pouring fuel on that fire. Rick Wilson tweeted out from the Lincoln Project yesterday. The only good Nazi is a dead Nazi. Really? And then when people were like, you sure? You sure that that's the rhetoric you want to go with right now? What, he's just saying Nazis? What, are you saying that someone's a Nazi? As if we don't know what they're saying. We know what they're saying. That's why when the Luigi Mangione thing occurred, I was arguing with right-wingers that were like, maybe a good thing. And I was like, certainly that's more profound on the left. You don't understand how the argument goes? Well, I know someone who lost health insurance, so screw this guy, this health insurance exec, kill him. Then the next argument is, and climate change is going to kill us all. So kill that guy that wants to drill more. Kill that guy that works at the oil field. Kill the Republicans. Remember that was the guy that shot Steve Scalise at the Republican ball field. That's why he was shooting them, because he listened to Bernie Sanders say hundreds of thousands may lose their health insurance. Oh boy, you can't have that. Now, I'm not blaming Bernie for saying that. If Bernie believes that's the case, he could say it. But when you're directly calling people Nazis and saying that this is an existential crisis and the end of the world, I pointed out after that first assassination attempt at Trump, I go to Destiny's Reddit, and there were comments like this. We tried to use the court system to lock up Trump, but the Supreme Court is corrupt and would not allow it. So therefore, we must escalate to the next level. We must take it into our own hands. Kevin says the projection here is insane. Kevin, would you like to call in? Clearly, the projection's insane. So I guess by projection, you mean that I'm actually the one that's advocated for violence. Interesting. Why don't you call in, Kevin? Or are you at work as well? You could already see. I saw a panel on CNN last night, and they were like, well, these attacks against Tesla companies, it's just protests. Just protest. That's all it is. It's protest when they do it. It's mostly peaceful. A fiery but peaceful protest. That's what it is when lefties do it. But January 6th. What was the excuse before January 6th, by the way? Just curious. Vosh, remember when he said, what he wants a world is a world where people are taking pot shots out window at Patriot Prayer people. That was after a guy walked up to people after a Patriot Prayer rally, an Antifa member, and shot and killed one of them. That's the world Vosh wants. After all, there is a trans genocide occurring. All of the white nationalist terrorist attacks that happen all the time. Name one. Go ahead. Name one in the past 4 years, HN. I've gone through those studies that show that white nationalists are the biggest harm. What it'll do is, for example, it will say that racial attacks that occur in prison that are done by white supremacist groups count as hate crimes and terror attacks that are done by white nationalists. But if it's a black group and a black gang, it doesn't count. That doesn't count. That's not considered left-wing violence. They'll do things, they'll say, well, actually, if you look at terror attack, for example, CISA, the Strategic Center for something. I remember 3 years ago, this study was going around that said this. And it hilariously was like, well, if you start at September 12th, 2000, September 12th, why? Did something happen on the previous day? I forget. Anyways, if you start there, right-wing terror attacks are far more common than left-wing terror attacks. Okay, how do you find terror attacks? And it was like, basically, as you would expect, using, violence or intimidation to achieve political ends. Cool, great, got it. A racist Australian guy that shot people. Let's go through this. The shootings of the gay bars in Florida. Okay, by a Muslim that the Democrats overwhelmingly pander to. The Australian guy that shot Muslims in an Islam church. The guy that shot the synagogue. The left obviously hates Jews. They're more prevalent on their Jew hatred, or at least it comes from more prestigious institutions. That's why they're freaking out right now that Trump's detained and is sending back this guy that advocated for these attacks. The New Zealand attack. The New Zealand attack was done by a guy who clearly was putting it. Yeah, you're right. He said he was doing it for like white nationalist reasons. He also said he was doing it for green reasons. That the earth was becoming overpopulated and climate change was going to kill us all, so he needed to depopulate. So was that a right-wing or a left-wing attack? The guy in Texas that shot a bunch of people said he was inspired by the guy in New Zealand. Part of that was climate change. How about the attempted assassination attempt on Donald Trump? Right, we have two. The first is obvious, a cover-up. We had someone that was connected to at least 8 other phones that they're not telling us what it was. He's a guy that supposedly who had voted Republican, was registered in public, but he had donated to Act Blue. I know 0 Republicans in my life that have ever donated to Act Blue. He was in the state of Pennsylvania, where you have many people that register as the party opposite of their party because we have closed primaries. So, for example, I might say, whoever the Republican is that wins the primary, I could deal with. But I want to make sure that the Democrat isn't Kamala Harris. So I'll register as a Democrat and do that. There's no proof that this guy was an active Republican at all. It's clearly that we're behind the facts. The second guy that tried to assassinate Trump, let's talk about him. Well, he's someone who obviously had vehement connections to Ukraine groups, so much so that he was featured in one of the videos for the Ukrainian fundraisers trying to raise money. He had flown to Ukraine several times and was vested in trying to get more money, troops, etc., to the people of Ukraine. Trump is someone who is seen as being more challenging to Ukraine, which is why Ukrainians in 2016, like Serhiy Lyshenko, interfered in our elections to try to stop Trump from winning. And even Zelensky campaigned for the Democrats 2 weeks before the election. Yeah, I'd say it's a fair estimation that the dude that was super concerned about Ukraine also didn't like Trump. Where's Trump DOG exposing him? I type in all caps. HN, if you're going to type in all caps, then maybe you should just call in. I know you're pretending to be at work, even though you work from home and you're on your laptop. It's clear if you work from home, you don't have to worry about a boss busting you. It's clear you're not heavily concentrated on your work anyways, because you're spending all this time typing. So you can at least do me the dignity of not typing in all caps. I don't know. Maybe Trump's DOJ sucks. Maybe Pam Bondi sucks. Maybe it's going to take time to expose what's going on and we'll eventually see it. Maybe we won't because it's all bullshit. I don't know. Do you have anything to dispute what I just said? Or are you going to appeal to authority and say, if that's true, then Trump would have locked them up? Then you could call in. When they call you, you could hang up. How's that? Yep, Kevin just talked about the second attempt. By the way, the entire argument, just so you're listening to this, everyone, let's clear this up. Clearly, the people that shot Trump were Trump supporters. That's the argument here. I mean, come on, Rob. Clearly, Trump supporters that were trying to assassinate Trump. Clearly. That's the argument that they're falling to. The same Secret Service that said that they couldn't get on a sloped roof assures us that these dudes were Trump supporters. Anyways, the CISA study that I was talking about, when it defined terrorism, came clear to me. I was like, oh, I could think of an instance where we saw acts of political violence or intimidation by large groups of people in order to achieve a political or cultural end. Circa 2021, I was like, yeah, fresh on my mind. Can anybody think of like any incidents in, say, I don't know, the entire summer of 2020 where we saw things that were political protests that got violent? Can anyone think of any? I feel like there was something. What could it have been? Oh, that's right. The hundreds upon hundreds of violent protests that resulted from Black Lives Matter. But would it shock you to know that CISA had a little footnote that said, we didn't count Black Lives Matter. They didn't count Chaz. Isn't that interesting? Here's how we define terrorism. But when left-wing acts of terror occur, we just won't count them. They don't count because we're not sure. Then you have to ask yourself, well, how many other incidents that aren't on your mind did they just decide to not count? How about all the attacks on pro-life centers? Well, we couldn't get to the bottom of that, says Chris Ray at the FBI, because those attacks occurred in the evening. It's harder to solve crimes that occur at night. So we just don't know. Only 10% of the protests were violent. Let's take that number, HN. How many Black Lives Matters protests do you think there were? Just spitballing. How many do you think there were? According to the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, there were more than 10,600 demonstrations between May 24th and August 22nd, 2020. Occurred in 2,730 districts. So if you're right that it was 10%, that means that we had 1,060 I guess it was only 1,060 violent protests. No big deal, right? Now, can you name me the right-wing violent protests? Go for it. Let's see if we can get to 1,000. Go ahead, HN, Kevin. So according to your own estimation, we had, we'll lower it to 1,000. We had 1,000 just between May and August. We had 1,000 instances of violent protests of Black Lives Matter. January 6th had more violence than all of the BLM protests. So notice that he changes the equation, as I said. So as this violence was going on, didn't have a problem with it. None of them did. And I said, as soon as there's one instance of violence on the other side, these people will lose their mind, which is exactly what you could see happening. So he can't answer it. So name me the instance. So January 6th, that's one. Let's see if we can get to 1,000. While we're waiting for him to name another incident, I could name 2 or 3 more. January 6th did not have more violence in any estimation. It didn't have quantity-wise more people that engaged in violence. Didn't have that. Didn't have more law enforcement agents were hurt. Not even close. Didn't have the amount of property destruction. Didn't have the amount of lives lost. All of that's far greater in the left-wing protests that we saw all summer. What were the other right-wing violence? I'll give you one. How about Charlottesville? There's another one that people bring up. Charlottesville. Now, never mind that most of Charlottesville was mutual combat, which is what Trump's point was. There were good and bad people on both sides. I remember watching vividly that footage, most of which has been taken off from online. I documented it on a website that I was on, Above Top Secret. Basically, you had a bunch of lefties that showed up with shields and ball bats and stuff, and the police intentionally pushed the alt-right people and the violent Antifa type people together, which resulted in clashes. But let's fuck all that. Let's just call it right-wing violence. Okay, that's 2. It was more than 36 people that died, Rhodey. Can anyone, Kevin, you're here, anyone, even those on the right, can you think of other examples of protests, right-wing protests that got violent? Any? I'm sure there's a handful over a 4 to 8 year period. Kenosha? I mean, that was left-wingers engaged in acts of violence and one person in self-defense shot back. Proud Boys? Where? Where were the Proud Boys protests that resulted in... There's a lot of Proud Boys that were engaged in violence against Antifa people. There were certainly right-wing protests, particularly in 2016, where there was violence, and almost every single time it was the exact same thing. Left-wing agitators came and started fights with right-wingers. But you didn't see much violence at like a Hillary rally. Why? Because there weren't right-wingers showing up to fight people at Hillary rallies. Battle of Berkeley, bunch of right-wingers trying to get in to hear Milo Yiannopoulos got the shit beat out of them by radical lefties. There were a lot of, remember the gun protest in Virginia in like 2019? Where they actually, the big fallout from that was they actually like cleaned the streets as they left and the town looked better after they left. No violence. Proud Boys seditious conspiracy. You're talking January 6th. Where was it? Now, to be honest, I don't know that 10% of the BLM protests were violent. I also think there was more than 10,000 of them. My little town of Clarion, or the town I live near to, it had a BLM protest. I don't know that it qualifies, though, if it would be included in those numbers. It was like 20 people that showed up outside the university, and they were like basically were super nonviolent, and they had every right to be there, and it didn't bother me in the least bit. No violence at all, no intimidation, no blocking of roads, just people making their voice heard. The only little thing that irked me was I knew 2 people that went to that bitched about other people going out during COVID in areas where they shouldn't that could possibly spread COVID. And my point was, hey man, if you're going out for the Black Lives Matter protest, who the hell are you to tell me that I can't go out and hand out flyers to vote for Trump or whatever? Tomato, tomato, as far as I'm concerned. By the way, I'm totally cool with you going out and doing whatever the hell you want. So the truth is that the left-wing violence has always, quantity-wise, been worse. Now, I'll even give you that as far as getting to the Capitol, January 6th, you could qualify as worse. Though I'll remind you, not one politician, etc., was harmed. And then I think there's much more to it. I think that anytime that you have, it's easy to, with a handful of people, to take an inflamed, passionate crowd and lead it towards violence. And if you set a scenario up where there won't be adequate police protection, it could quickly get out of hand. And I think that's what January 6th was. Doesn't excuse the people that engaged in violence, by the way. Oh, we know Brimstone. Of course, when Trump had to be evacuated to a bunker, Biden made fun of him for it. Why don't you go back to your bunker, Biden said a couple weeks later. All the left thought it was funny. Bunker boy. No big deal, though. When they were using Molotov cocktails to burn down buildings in an attempt to attack the White House and get at Donald Trump. Yeah, you got TMG says Rand Paul being attacked, Steve Scalise getting shot, Trump getting shot, universities vandalized property, and conservative speakers come. The list goes on. And it will get worse. Because now it will sort of go underground. Now we have a guy from InfoWars was just shot. We'll see. I'm not saying that that's definitely an act of someone targeting him for his political beliefs. But then hours after that, we have a doxing of another one of the guys from InfoWars. Twice he was doxed. Imagine your coworker being murdered and then you get doxed twice the next day. He may have been shot for money or something like that. It's certainly, I don't bring that up as an instance of left-wing violence, though we may find out it will. But what I'm saying is immediately following that, the doxing, there's a 95% chance that the reason that someone from InfoWars is being doxed is because of their political beliefs. The assassination attempt of Brett Kavanaugh. These are the sorts of things that have just been allowed to occur. And I've talked about this for years. Remember, I sound like a broken record on this. But remember, when Congressman Gifford got shot in Arizona, now we know a lot about the motives of the guy that shot her because he was putting YouTube videos up. This guy was insane. Like, he was literally putting up YouTube videos of him being like unhinged on the college campus that he went to. And it wasn't like political at all. It was just some psychopath. And he shoots Congressman Gifford. Okay? Democrats went nuts. They said it was Sarah Palin's fault because she had put out a brochure with the district that Gifford was from with a bullseye on it, saying this is where we need to target to win elections. And they said, see, that means she's at fault. That was her saying target them with guns. Bernie Sanders fundraised off of it and said, is it even safe to walk down the streets of Arizona anymore as a Democrat? The Republican rhetoric has made it too dangerous. Then we had a Bernie Sanders supporter shoot up a Republican ball field, including shooting Steve Scalise. Did Bernie Sanders say, my rhetoric has been too dangerous and it led to this? Is it even safe to be a Republican? No! He said all violence is bad. Nancy Pelosi was asked, do you think you all's rhetoric led to inspiring this shooter? She was incredulous. How dare you, she said. How dare you even suggest it? That's absurd. But wait a minute, you blame anytime there's the rare incidents where there's a political attack from a Republican or against a Democrat, you can't wait to blame stochastic terrorism and the right wing's rhetoric and this, that, and the other. Now we're back to, Trump's in charge. Threats against Trump? Nah, those people trying to kill Trump are actual Trump supporters. They like Trump. That's why they're shooting at him. It's based to target Elon. He's a shitty dude. He did a Nazi salute, so, you know. Oh, they're vandalizing people's personal Teslas? That you don't know shit? Maybe they're... How many people own Teslas because they originally were like, yeah, I'm trying to help the environment? Previous to 2020, or hell, like up until 2022, let's say, up until Musk bought Twitter, or the few months before Musk bought Twitter, if you just had to take a guess, if you saw someone, a Tesla, would you assume that there's a better chance that the owner of that Tesla is Republican or Democrat? Previous to Trump buying, or Musk buying Twitter. Now, obviously, there's going to be huge numbers of people on both sides. And there's probably going to be people that are apolitical. But my guess would have been, hey, if you drive a Tesla, chances are you're concerned about like green energy, climate change, probably a lefty. Now, I would assume there's still a good portion of those people that didn't run out and sell their Tesla just because Elon Musk is working with Doge. So you're going to vandalize that car? Like, oh, this will show Elon. What the fuck are you doing? How's that proving shit? Maybe that's just some guy trying to go to work to feed his family. I'll show him. I'll vandalize his car. Wow. Good job. Yuck, yuck. Oh, well, you know, Elon sucks. That's what you get. By the way, I thought climate change was so important that we needed to do everything possible because we only had like 12 months. So now we're attacking Tesla dealerships and people that own Teslas. It's almost like Musk's politics are more important than, you know, having electric cars to save the earth. Almost like that, right? Maybe I know it's a layman. It looks to me, this is going to blow your mind, but as a layman, it kind of looks to me like they're full of shit. I know that's hard to believe, right? Surely not. That can't be the case, right? Reddit's a cesspool. Teslas aren't the only electric cars right now. So, if I thought that the world was going to end because of climate change, and one of the big chances we had of solving that was electric cars, I wouldn't be like, oh, well, now I can attack Teslas because there's you can get a Chevy Leaf or whatever. So it's cool now. Now we'll attack people with Teslas. Yeah, I think Tesla's still over 50%, though. That may have changed, but... This is from February 13th, 2025. There's Destiny. Based on Reddit. Message to Tesla owners received in Northern California. No Nazis in America. Tesla owners trade or sell before February 12th. After that, it's open season. As on Reddit, based, says Destiny. I say, I don't want your stupid. No, I don't want to reach more users. Go away. I don't want to promote. There. I said, a reminder, Destiny said Trump saying fight like hell was a literal call to violence. If someone from Tesla gets shot, may Destiny be held to his own standard. This is the guy Democrats vying for DNC chair lined up to be interviewed by. This is who the Democratic Party is. Starting to get it? Trump says fight like hell. Clearly that's a call to violence. That's insurrection. That's terrorism. Anyone that owns Tesla, you're a Nazi. You better trade or sell by February 12th. After that, it's open season on you. Beast. Those are the people that cry about political violence. And it's only going to get worse. You saw it with the Luigi Mangione thing. These people feel morally righteous. They have worked themselves into thinking we're entering the Third Reich, and that Trump is literally Hitler, and Musk is like Goebbels, and we must stop them. Let me ask the audience point blank, as terrible as it is to think about this. What do you think the chances are? A yes or a no will suffice. Yes or no? Do you think there's a better than not chance that there's another assassination attempt against Trump before his term's over? Yes or no? If you had to guess, do you think there'll be another assassination attempt on Trump? Yeah, there's a better than not chance there will be. 1/3 around there is about a quarter to a third of Democrats polled after the assassination attempt against Trump said we would have been better off if he was killed. It might be JD, Elon, or Trump, yeah. That's who we're dealing with. Again, this was the same group that 25% to 30% thought if you didn't get vaccinated under COVID, your children should be taken from you. Let's get to some super chats. I missed a couple, and I like money. Moonlight for $10. Thanks so much, Moonlight. Says, what's your advice for someone who's ideologically possessed politically that wants to develop their own legit opinions and find truthful news sources they can rely on? Feels overwhelming. It is overwhelming. My recommendation, I think the best thing you could do is try to find sources that you could trust on both sides of the aisle. Everyone has a bias. So in order to check your bias, you should be listening to people that you know have biases against your position. Trust your gut. A lot of times stories come that you could tell just by trying to like instinctually think through it for a couple seconds. Wait a minute, that doesn't sound reasonable. Like, let's assume Elon Musk is a Nazi. Do you think for a second that he would be openly advertising it? Or I'll show you some, do you think Trump said Nazis were good people? Does that sound like, even if you're like, well, I think Trump's evil, so he may have said that, but does that sound like anything that someone remotely intelligent would say publicly? That's the president? I had a friend that read a Babylon Bee article that said, did you see that Nancy Pelosi ripped up the Constitution during Trump's State of the Union speech? And I was like, think about that for a second. You think that happened? So it's very difficult. We're all ideologically captured to some. We all have biases, and we're more likely to listen to stories that confirm our biases. It's true of me as well. So the best you could do is try to actively engage with people that you could trust aren't super unhinged, that disagree with you, and then try to balance yourself out. A similar question from Intel Wild says, Rob, what can we as conservatives do to fight back against the evil woke Democrats? The best thing you could do is live your life in a way that is just and appropriate and moral. That's always like, the same is true of like, well, how can we encourage people to be Christians? By living a good life. That's number one, always, right? If you're living a life where you're personally happy and you're doing good for yourself and your family and your community, that's always the most important thing. And if there is to be justice in the world, that will be noticeable and win out. The truth is, the more irrational that the Democrats act, the worse it becomes for them. Say what you will about Trump and some of the dumb things he says. I did a whole show yesterday on things I have problems with Trump about. But let's not forget, Democrats' approval rating right now in Congress is at like 24%. They're underwater. They can't, they're still trying to argue like, well, how do we kind of hide the fact that we're incredibly radical on the trans debate? Well, they're still, why did they lose 2024? What's the Democratic consensus on why they lost 2024? What's the number one argument that I've heard from the talking heads on television? No, the trans stuff, that's something. The number one argument I heard, why was Trump picked over Kamala Harris? Racism. Linebacker gets it. It was racism. That's why. It's because they're racist. The country's racist. That's the problem. Or they'll say, the problem's the messaging. Not what we actually believe. It's the messaging. Right, misogyny. Yep. They still don't get it. There's some that do. Like, you hear people like Bill Maher that gets it a little more. People like Jon Stewart get it a little more. Gavin Newsom, make fun of him all you want. He's doing the right thing to set himself up in 2028. He's starting a podcast where he's bringing right-wingers on. And he's trying to sound like the moderate Democrat. He is not a moderate Democrat. He was for lockdowns pretty much more than any governor. He pushed the trans bullshit pretty much more than any governor. He pushed the race baiting shit pretty much more than any governor. But Gavin Newsom has a talent and a set of skills that makes him a very effective politician. He is a charming speaker. He is charismatic. He's good looking. And that matters, regardless if you think it does or doesn't. It does. Charisma, good looking, and he has no conscience whatsoever. He will completely change any position on any fucking issue like that. He doesn't give a shit. He purely wants power. And that's a very good combination to get elected. Very effective. You can make fun of him, but I'm telling you, that's the truth. My old friend Gizmo. Gizmo, thanks so much for $10. Says, thanks for all you do. Thank you guys. Thanks for what you all do. He does kind of look like Patrick Bateman, doesn't he, from American Psycho? Well, he's a great liar. That stuff matters. And he will be effective. But the more unhinged ones, like, just let them say, actually, the attacks on Tesla is good. It's just peaceful protest. Okay. There you go. Do I think it'll be Newsom and Vance next election? That right now would be what I would put as the front runners, but we're so far away from the next election, anything could happen. But that would be my guess. Josh Shapiro's got some scandals coming back home here in Pennsylvania, but he's a possibility. Kamala's a possibility if they want to lose again. She's terrible, but that's not true. There are certainly many people saying the attacks on Tesla are good. I just showed you Destiny saying it was based. So you're just full of shit to say no Democrats are saying that. Can you show me anyone who's condemned it? The vitriol against Elon Musk is for two things. The one is because he bought Twitter and stopped their censorship complex so that now people that aren't pro-establishment have a voice. They hate him for that. And second is because Doge is shutting off the money game that so many of them rely on. I'm going to quote this because I don't want to take credit for saying this because I retweeted someone else that said it. Wall Street Maverick says, we are taxed. Taxes go to USAID. Leftists create an NGO. NGO gets funded by USAID. Leftists in NGO do zero real work. NGO pays leftists huge salaries. Leftists donate salaries from NGO to Democrats. That's why Democrats are freaking out over Trump and Elon killing USAID. And that's exactly right. For example, you could see it with teachers' unions. Teachers' unions donate heavily to Democrats, who in turn send large funding to teachers' unions. I hate Destiny, but obviously he was joking when he posted that. How many times are we going to accept that this is a joke? Was it a joke? Was it a joke when he said that he couldn't answer his friend Pisco after he was fucking melting down for terms of service reasons, whether he wanted that bullet to kill Trump, and then said, well, the worst thing that happened was that the bullet missed? Was that a joke? Was it a joke then when he was talking about Luigi Mangione? And he said they went after the wrong CEO, implying they should have went after Musk. Was that a joke? Was it a joke when he was asked specifically about why he would condemn the Mangione attack, but not the Trump one? And he talked about how Trump was tyrannical and so much worse. Was that a joke? But with Elon, it is a joke. It's a joke with Elon. Bullshit. It's 8:30. We'll go to 9. Any lefty? Can I chum any lefty to call in and get wrecked? You still working, HN? You ready to call in? Chuck Schumer at one point said that if Republicans shut down the government, it would result in millions of people's lives being endangered. Now, Chuck Schumer is saying that the Senate Democrats will shut down the government before they accept Republicans' bill. To which I say, great. I don't want the Republican bill to pass anyways, so great. The Democrats' standard was when they were in power and Republicans were in the minority, if the Republicans didn't pass the bill, they were shutting down the government. Remember Jimmy Kimmel crying? Let's see if I can find that clip. I can't find it right now. The actual clip. It's funny. I type in Jimmy Kimmel tears, and it comes up a bunch of shit about Trump. When the Republicans were in the minority, when Obama was in office and there was a potential shutdown, he blamed Republicans. When Republicans were in the majority and there was a shutdown that Democrats did, he blamed Republicans. When Democrats were in the majority and there was a shutdown, he blamed Republicans. Chuck Schumer blames Republicans. You want to know what we'll talk about? You wanted to talk about right-wing violence and how January 6th had more violence than all of the Black Lives Matter. That's what we'll talk about, HN. Here's the link. So as we wait, Chuck Schumer make no mistake about it, extreme Republicans are openly saying they want a government shutdown. That will harm millions of Americans. That's what Schumer is saying today. That's what he's saying today, that he wants a shutdown that'll harm millions of Americans. Oh, but Rob, no, they want to shut down for good reasons. Bullshit. So did the Republicans. You there, HN? Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, I need before your HN from the chat. Yes, can you hear me? Okay, your HN from the chat. Okay, let me wait. Audience, can you hear him? Go ahead and talk for a second. So let me know, audience, if you could hear him or not. No, you can't hear him. So let me. Okay, 1 second. I don't know why your Discord would be beeping. Give me 1 second here. All right, this should do it. One second. Why is that not working? Oh. Okay. All right. Now, try it. They should be able to hear you. Sorry, I'm getting used to StreamYard here. Okay. I think they should be able to hear you now. Audience, let me know if you can't hear him. I think you should be able to, though. All right. So, January 6th was still can't hear him. Okay, 1 second. 1 second then. Let me. What am I doing wrong? To share audio, share a tab or screen instead. Now try it. Sorry, you're sort of a guinea pig here for this. Hopefully this works. All right. We're hoping that this works. Nothing still. I'll be damned. Yeah. No, that won't work. It won't matter. let me see. What can I potentially do here? No, it's not working. It's nothing. All right. Just wait 1 second. Also share audio. Yes. All right. Last try. Let's try it here. All right. Go ahead.
Test.
Okay. Can anybody hear that? They're saying your audio is low.
Well, yeah, I'm using my laptop's microphone.
There we go. That'll be good enough. All right. So,
okay, cool.
January 6th was more violence than all of the Black Lives Matter votes. That's your claim?
Yep.
Okay. In which way are you?
It was worse.
Okay. When you said more, so you're already admitting that you're incorrect about that, because more would imply a quantity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so there was probably more people that were injured and hurt during the Black Lives Matter protests.
Okay, but, so would you say, let's just go real quick through, more people killed, Black Lives Matter or January 6th?
So there were a lot of people that were killed during BLM by like not actually attending the protests. They were like outside agitators. So if we're including that, then
more people killed, Black Lives, even if we take out the outside By the way, how do you define that? So there's a Black Lives Matter protest. You say that someone was an outside agitator. Give me an example of that.
Like somebody who didn't care about the protest, but used it as an excuse to do other stuff.
Yeah, well, you could say that about any sort of protest movement. There could be a lot of people that are there for disparate reasons. For example, just because I go to the January 6th protest because I feel the election was stolen doesn't mean that I'm co-signing to the people that are there to engage in acts of violence for other reasons, right?
Yeah, you're right.
So what would you, but even if we accept that, so how many people do you think that were Black Lives Matter, legitimate, the real Black Lives Matter, that were either killed or killed other people during the protest? Is that number higher or lower than the amount of people that died in January 6th?
We say it's higher, but not by a lot.
Okay, so quantity, when you said that there was more violence January 6th than all the Black Lives Matter, so far we got deaths, not true. How about the amount of people injured? BLM or January 6th?
I probably BLM, but not by much again.
You're wrong. It's overwhelmingly. It's overwhelming. How about just law enforcement injured? January 6th or Black Lives Matter?
Yeah, this is one main one that I was thinking about, and I would say that January 6th was way worse for law enforcement.
That's not true. For example, we could see that there were over 50 law enforcement and Secret Service people that were injured alone in the attack of May 30th, 2020, the attack on the White House that was using lethal weapons in an attempt to breach the White House to remove the sitting president of the United States. That was so serious that Secret Service had to take the president of the United States and force him to flee to a bunker. That alone had over 60 officers harmed. We could, if you would like, I could look up a estimation.
Well, you went mute. I can't hear you anymore.
No, I'm not talking. So I'm just looking up. More than 2,000 were injured, according to one report.
Okay, yeah, well, about these injuries, like during whenever they put the president in the bunker, stuff like that, like, sure, there were a lot of law enforcement supposedly injured, but those injuries probably like minor, most of them are like minor scratches or something really dumb. because
How many
everything would
how
be
many how
counted
many
as
people
injuries.
how many law enforcement were injured January 6th?
A lot,
Okay,
especially afterwards,
how many
like
afterward?
mental,
They were injured afterwards. Explain that to me.
like it it caused them a lot of mental anguish, and some officers even died afterwards because
How did they die afterwards? What happened?
I don't remember exactly, but it was like due to like mental stuff, like
How many people, they committed suicide is what you're trying to say.
possibly yes,
How many
some of
officers
them.
committed suicide after the BLM protest?
I haven't heard of any, but I think for the January 6th, it was like over 10.
Okay, so I just want to be clear. What you're claiming is any officer that committed suicide after January 6th, clearly it was because of January 6th. But no one's kept any tabs on how many officers committed suicide after Chaz riots, Black Lives Matter riots, etc.
Yeah, well, that's because none of the officers then were saying that they're having issues because of Chaz or the riots or
How would you
whatever.
know that?
But
Was
or
anyone asking him? Let's say that Trump puts together a task force and it turns out that 400 officers committed suicide afterwards, and a substantial amount of officers come out and say, "We felt horrible. Our mental anguish was immense because we saw our cities being torn apart, but our Democratic mayors were telling us that we couldn't intervene." Then you would say that it was way worse, then, right? And that Black Lives
yeah,
Matter and the people that supported it have those deaths on their hands, much like you're saying about January 6th, correct?
I would.
Yeah, you're full of shit. You wouldn't.
No, well, so I remember, I think it was like the politicians that were in the Capitol. I think like even Nancy Pelosi was one of them, which she was like giving a press conference where she was talking about where there were like over 10 officers from January 6th that lost their lives.
Yes, I
And there was like a
understand
direct,
Democrats want to blow this up to more than what it was, and is talking about officers that killed themselves later are standing on their deaths and exploiting them, saying, "Oh, they killed themselves because January 6th." Explain to me the mental angle. What do you think that mental anguish was? Why was the mental anguish over January 6th worse than, say, the mental anguish that law enforcement would have went through under May 30th, 2020, when they tried to break into the White House to presumably kill Donald Trump? Why was the mental anguish for one worse than the other?
so for January 6th, that one was like a serious threat,
How is it
where the
serious?
officers, there was a lot at risk for the entire
What
country.
was at risk that wasn't on May
Um,
30th?
our politicians would actually get attacked and some of them maybe
Why
killed.
did Trump get moved to a bunker if they didn't think that our politicians could be attacked on May 30th, 2020?
Because so Trump was moved to a bunker most likely just as from an abundance of caution,
Oh,
because the Secret
when violent
Service.
lefties are using lethal weapons to attack the White House under Trump, he wasn't really in danger, it was just caution. But these politicians were really in danger on January 6th.
So whenever the during the protest, the BLM protest, did the protesters get anywhere near the White House
Yes, they were at the fence of the White House.
at the
And the only
gates? Yeah,
reason
but
they didn't get the
nowhere
only
actually.
the only
They
reason they
didn't get inside the White House.
did any the only reason that they were unable to get into the White House is because one of the worst kept secret that people like you will lie about is we know that when lefties come to protests like that, they will get violent. And so therefore there is adequate police presence. That's not the case when we have right-wing protests.
Now you're the one that's coping, Rob.
Oh, I am coping? Was there an adequate
Yeah.
police presence on May 30th, 2020?
Honestly, I don't know, but I assume so. Yeah.
Was there an adequate police presence January 6th?
No, but that's Trump's fault, right? Because
Why is that? Can you explain why it's Trump's fault?
because he didn't call in the National
Did he
Guard.
suggest the National Guard be there beforehand?
He did, but even if the people said no, he still could have called them anytime.
I suppose he could have. And then people like you would have been saying, Trump's declared martial law. Oh my God, he's mobilized the National Guard and the military to go after his opponents. And you know how I know that's what you would have said? Because as January 6th was occurring, it is the official position of Democrats that simultaneously this was an obvious insurrection that was attempting to kill officials like Mike Pence, but at the same time, career military personnel like the lieutenant general that the captain of the guard, Capitol Chief Sund, was requesting, please let us have the National Guard, said, nah, because of optics. Now, what do you think they meant when they said optics? By the way, we're told that's why the Sergeant at Arms Paul Irving, whose boss was Nancy Pelosi, also said beforehand that the National Guard couldn't be deployed. Nancy Pelosi wouldn't go for it because of optics. What do they mean by optics? Can you explain what you think they meant by that?
No, I can't, and I don't care to explain because none of this is relevant.
It is absolutely
So,
relevant. If you're too
no, it's
so
not.
are you telling me that I'm talking to someone that doesn't even have the wherewithal to try to intuit what you think they may have meant by optics? Do you think January 6th was a very important day to get to the bottom of?
Let me explain why I'm saying it's not relevant. Okay, because I agree with you. Before the protests even happened, the Democrats were not allowing Trump to bring in, or they told him not to because it looked like it would be like a fascist takeover or something like that.
You just said you have no idea what optics meant. Now you're saying you do know?
I'm saying after all the violence broke out, then even the Democrats were telling Trump to bring in the National Guard.
That's not
he
true
still
at all.
refused.
That's not true at all. Again, so I asked you about, we got on this specifically. You said it's all Trump's fault that they weren't there. I said he wanted people there beforehand. You're like, but that was bad, but whatever. But the day of, I said the day of, when the guy who was in charge for defense said that he over and over requested one from the Sergeant at Arms under Nancy Pelosi, because he had to ask to be able to request. So first he has to ask permission to request, then he has to request. The first step is getting the Sergeant at Arms to sign off. He says that he made 17 calls to the Sergeant at Arms, Paul Irving, who kept saying, I have to run it up the chain of command. Paul Irving testified that on the first call that he was requested, that he said yes. So that is, one of those two is lying, and Capitol Chief Sund says, I got the receipts, I have the call logs, I could prove it. So it seems most likely that Paul Irving's lying. Sund later says that he had dinner with the other, I forget his name, the other Sergeant at Arms that operated under McConnell, and said, hey, how come the day before January 6th, when I asked you about deploying the National Guard and I came to you, it seemed like you were already known what I was going to ask? And he said, oh, that's because Paul Irving called me and said, yeah, whatever you do, say no. Nancy Pelosi would never go for it. So both before and during the day of, the person that was operating under Nancy Pelosi, and Nancy Pelosi was his boss, was saying, no, we don't want the National Guard there for optics, right? Then, when he was allowed to request permission, once it was too late and they were already at the Capitol,
But Trump can't just override all these people?
A lieutenant general said, no, we don't want to deploy them because of optics. Now, just to wrap this all up in a neat bow, my argument's going to be people like you and the Democrats would have said, if Trump overruled those people and said, you know what, even though I've been told over and over by people, including in the military, including the Sergeant at Arms, that no, you shouldn't deploy the National Guard because it'll look like fascism, he should have overridden them. And I said that the Democrats then and people like you would have said, yep, that's fascism. And you say, I'm not concerned with that. That's irrelevant. I don't know what optics means. I would suggest, seeing as how you already said you knew what optics meant on January 5th, and you said, yeah, they meant optics because it would look like fascism, would intuit to me that you also know that that's what they meant on January 6th. And you don't want to answer the question because you know that it looks bad for your position that this is all Trump's fault.
So I will answer. I will say what I will say is what I said before, which is whenever they actually infiltrated the Capitol building, that would have been the perfect time for Trump to just override everybody and send the National Guard in.
You would have yelled fascism, as would have Nancy Pelosi, as would have the Democrats. They would have said, Trump's not a professional. He's not a person that makes these security decisions. That's why we had Capitol Chief Sund. That's why they have to go through a proper chain of command where they talk to military officials and police officials, and they make their best judgment. And Trump, for example, let's say he rules the National Guard in, and all of a sudden it becomes a big clash that gets even more violent, and more people die. They would have said, that's Trump's fault. He shouldn't have called those people in. Now,
well, let me ask you this.
Sure.
So why are Democrats now saying that Trump should have sent the National Guard in? If what you're saying is true, why would they be saying now?
Why do you think?
Trump,
let's ask you. Let's see if you could answer your own question. Why do you think they would be doing that?
Because after everybody knew that they were going to break into the Capitol and start threatening politicians, that would have been the perfect time to send the National Guard
The
in.
reason they're doing that's because they've exploited January 6th at every instance in order to politically silence their opponents. And they were always going to say that whatever Trump did was the worst thing. In fact, this was their strategy the entire summer of love. They constantly had Democrats in position of powers strategically tell their law enforcement to back down and allow the rioting to occur. And then Trump would say, okay, then we're going to send in the National Guard. And the governors of those states would say, nope, we refuse to allow the National Guard, because the hope was that Trump would have deployed them. Then they would have said, see, Trump's a fascist. He's deploying our domestic military against peaceful protesters. That's what's going on. And so no matter what Trump did, they were going to blame him. In fact, when Trump said, go march peacefully, they said, that was a dog whistle to Trump saying, go be violent. It did not matter what Trump did. Whatever he did, he would have been blamed. Now, to further this, not only was it purposeful that they didn't have adequate law enforcement there, which is why things got more out of hand on January 6th than May 30th, we're going to find out, well, hopefully we probably won't find out, to be honest, but we're going to see that what do you think the most serious event that occurred on January 6th was? What actually had the potential to literally kill politicians and other people in significant ways?
Storming the Capitol.
I'm sorry, you cut out there.
I said just the act of storming the Capitol was the worst.
The act of storming. I disagree. Was there any lethal weapon that was there? Like a serious lethal weapon?
Yeah, I heard that there was like a bomb or something.
Oh,
I'm not
that
sure
sounds,
if this is the
that
same
sounds
thing.
very serious. Tell me about that. What do we know about that? Sounds very serious.
Honestly, I have not heard about it a lot, but I
Isn't
heard
it
that there was
interesting?
like some.
So when I started talking today's stream about like violence that we see from the left, and particularly started focusing on the Tesla stuff, other things like that, and you immediately were like, but January 6th, you could never talk about left-wing violence because January 6th. You seem to know very little about it other than with the Democrat talking points. You have almost no curiosity.
Are you saying that
You have almost no curiosity as to why the Democrats didn't want the National Guard there before January 6th. You have almost no knowledge of the facts of the person that was tasked with security there, Capitol Chief Sund, and all of the problems he talks about, how he was told even on the day of January 6th that they couldn't have him fight optics. You have almost no knowledge of the pipe bomb. It's almost like all you have is the exact talking points of the Democrats, which I find unusual because it's clear that January 6th is a seminal moment for you. So much so that years later, near 4.5 years later, when I'm talking about Tesla and attacks like that, you're like, you can't even talk about that because of January 6th. So how is it that you know so little?
Wait, are you saying that the pipe bomb was planted by like a Democrat?
So what you're saying, I'm asking you why you know so little.
Because no news like sites really report on it too much.
Oh, that's not
I
true.
barely
Revolver
ever heard.
News is reported on exclusively. Thomas Massey's reported on it. We saw Massey interview Benny Thompson, who was the chair. He asked for 20-something minutes that was on C-SPAN and other places about what they know about the pipe bomb and all the things that we hear about it. What you mean is it's not on the news sources that you usually consume. That's what you mean.
Yeah, the news sites that are respected by most of the world,
Give me an example.
like New York Times, CNN.
By the way,
I even watch
when it
Fox
comes
News.
to coverage of Trump, do you think that the New York Times and CNN have been fair?
Probably not, but I do watch Fox News as well.
Okay,
So
so just to be clear, when you're talking about the news sites that are trusted, it's news sites that you're admitting have been unfair to Trump.
well, no, because Fox News. I've never seen Fox News report about this.
I've seen Greg Gutfeld talk about it. What
Well,
shows you? How
well-
often do you watch Fox News, and what shows do you watch on Fox News?
Honestly, I only watched the YouTube channel.
You watch the YouTube channel. How often are you checking Fox News' YouTube channel?
Pretty often, to be honest. Yeah.
How many, what do you say? 20 minutes a day you're watching Fox News YouTube?
Yeah, something like that.
One, I don't believe you. And second, even if that was true, to claim that that's indicative of, well, that's a full news source and what they're covering is nonsensical. If I thought that there was an issue that was sort of the seminal issue in our country, would it be, am I intuiting this incorrectly, that you would think January 6th is the single most important day of our country in, like, say, the last 10 years?
Yeah, probably.
I think I would have tried to do a little more research if I thought that it was that important. You seem to have done nothing. You're like, whatever the New York Times and CNN say, and I check
Well,
out
how am I supposed to do
Fox's.
research on something I don't even know about that much?
That's right. You don't even know about it, and yet your feelings are so certain that 4.5 years later, when someone brings up an unrelated topic about left-wingers and threats of violence when it comes to Tesla, you're like, you can't even talk about that because of January 6th. But then as soon as we start to push back a little, you're like, well, how would I be expected to know anything about January 6th?
I'll talk about the pipe bomb.
You were unaware that there was a pipe bomb on January 6th.
I'm going to be completely honest. The only reason why I even know about the pipe bomb is because I think I heard you and Destiny debate about this before. You brought it up.
There are probably
And so,
lefties in the chat right now that at least are aware of that pipe bomb without just hearing me and Destiny talk about it. I would say that puts you as near the bottom 10% on information knowledgeable about January 6th. You
okay,
are
well,
only
I mean,
listening to things that confirm to your narrative. That's it. You have no
well, I
interest.
mean,
For example, if I thought, do you think on January 5th, for example, did they know that potentially hundreds of thousands of people were showing up to this protest?
yes, they did.
Okay.
Yeah, they did.
As a layman, because I assume you don't have a background in law enforcement or security. Is that fair? Me neither, by the way, so I'm not making fun of you for that.
Yeah.
Okay. As a layman, do you think that there should have been more of a police presence ready for January 6th?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So then aren't you the least bit curious as to why the Democrats didn't want it?
Well, they already explained why they didn't want it. It's because they didn't want it to look like a fascist takeover.
Okay, and you find that excuse acceptable?
Yeah, I do because so I think Trump like agitated that crowd. If he didn't agitate the crowd, then it would not have turned into a big old storming of the Capitol.
Did you expect on January 5th that Trump would have agitated the crowd on January 6th?
No, I would not have expected
You
him
didn't.
to.
Do you think the Democrats would have expected that?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
I would guess they would say yes.
You think that the Democrats knew that Trump would tell them to go to the Capitol?
Peacefully in protest? No, I don't know that they knew exactly what he would have said, but the Democrats, for example, in Colorado that kept him off the ballot, said that evidence of him agitating and calling to violence were all leading up into January 6th. For example, he at one point said, we need people that fight like Jim Jordan and not people that are unwilling to fight like Mitch McConnell. Democrats said that was clearly a call to violence from Trump. That was a tweet that occurred before January 6th. Also, he reposted someone saying on like January 3rd, don't worry, Mr. President, the cavalry is coming. They said that that repost was evidence that he was calling for violence on January 6th. Given that Democrats think that those posts that were publicly available before January 6th, that would seem to me that they're saying that those were calls to violence, that they would have thought that Trump could have agitated people on the day of January 6th and were calling for violence. Do you disagree?
Actually, yeah, no. You made a convincing argument, so I would agree.
So then, given that, if Democrats knew that he was calling for violence on January 6th, why wouldn't they have had adequate police presence? They knew that Trump was going to call for violence, but they thought the optics of it looking fascist were worth not having the police there and letting the crowd be violent? That's your argument?
Yeah, maybe the Democrats dropped the ball there, but that still is an excuse, Trump telling them to go to the Capitol and
peacefully and have their voices heard.
Yeah, I mean, he was kind of giving mixed messages, though.
Okay, what do you think's more of a mixed message? That or when violent left-wingers, by the way, you want to talk about police officers with PTSD. I'm no police officer, but my guess would be dealing with the protests like January 6th would be one thing. Having my precinct burned to the ground by people that wanted to kill me probably would be another level of giving me PTSD. That's what the lefties did in Minneapolis or Milwaukee, whichever one it was. And the day after that, Kamala Harris promoted a bail fund for the people that were locked up during that incident. Why isn't that a call to violence?
So if it's true that that caused PTSD, then I don't see why the Republicans wouldn't be using that as a weapon like Democrats are using January
many of the
6th.
Republicans don't like Trump anyways, and people like Mitch McConnell were more than happy to help use January 6th to force Trump to leave and keep his mouth shut. Secondly, just because Republicans aren't as good as exploiting propaganda in that way as the Democrats doesn't mean that what I'm saying is not true. The truth
Yeah,
is,
that's
there was
one.
an incentive for people to get near celebrity status, as we see with many of the officers that have reported on January 6th, like what's his name, Michael McFall or whatever, the tatted up dude that was crying there and this, that, and the other. They've become household names and celebrities. That's the way it goes. If you're a whistleblower that speaks out against Trump, like Eric Charmella or Vindman, you become a hero. You could go on book tours. You could make millions of dollars. If you're someone like Ziegler and Shapley that from the IRS that were whistleblowers against Biden's DOJ, the FBI, etc., you're persona non grata. You're given shitty assignments. You're fired. You don't get your pension.
The vast majority of Republicans are on Trump's side.
Now,
Like the
because he won,
overwhelming.
they weren't then when he was seen as a loser. Point is, you haven't made any argument other than just rank appeals to authority. Well, I assume Democrats dropped the ball. Well, if there was going to be any PTSD, Republicans would have found it out. Again, now back to the bail fund. If Trump's saying go peacefully and have your voice heard is a call to violence, how is it promoting a bail fund for people that burned down a police precinct also not encouraging violence?
Well, I mean, you can say that, but then I could also say how is giving pardons to everybody in January 6th.
What does that have anything to do with the question that I just asked?
It just shows that that the other side might be even worse.
It's a total non sequitur. What we're talking about is before the pardons, let's say Trump loses and the pardons don't occur, and me and you are having this conversation and it's President Kamala. Then what are you going to say?
Yeah, honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, you don't know. You don't know about the pipe bombs. You don't know. You just assume that Democrats dropped the ball when it came to not wanting an adequate police force there. You don't have any explanation for Kamala and her why it's not a call to violence for her to promote a bail fund for people that burn down precincts. You just don't know. But anyways, you think January 6th is like the most important day in the last 10 years of our country. You just happen to have not thought
Actually,
through this
no.
stuff.
Here, I just thought about something. So Kamala, doing the bail funding, she's not like most of the people that bail fund would help would be nonviolent people that were just caught up in the arrests.
What percentage of the people? So your argument is Kamala knew that the police were corrupt and they were corruptly arresting innocent people, and the bail fund was only designed to go to those innocents. That's your argument?
No, it's not. It's that the vast majority of the people that were arrested were nonviolent. And
they
the
were
bail fund would have helped
Were the
them a lot.
vast majority of the people that were arrested on January 6th violent or nonviolent?
Since they all of them went into the Capitol, which is a really, really bad thing.
That's not true. They didn't
I
all
would
go.
say
Not
that
everyone that was arrested went into the Capitol, so that's not true. And so you're saying that because there was an act of trespass. Okay, what if I were to tell you that when the Milwaukee precinct was burnt down, that everyone that stuck around that protest actually broke the law because it was considered trespassing, amongst other things, because curfew was called because of the violence that was occurring. So anyone that stayed after that actually committed basically the same crime that the people that went in the Capitol did. Trespass. So now those people all basically engaged in terrible acts of violence as well, correct?
So you're like overly simplifying it by just saying trespass. What they were actually trying to do was they were trying to get into the Capitol to overthrow the election.
Did they vastly outnumber the police when they made it into the Capitol?
Yeah.
Why didn't they overthrow it then? Why didn't they harm even one? Why, in fact, when we see footage, like when they made it into the chambers and you saw the Chewbacca guy, David Chansley, you know what I'm talking about? The dude with the horns and the flag?
Yeah.
Why'd they just mill about peacefully? Why didn't they all charge?
Oh.
If the goal was, they'd already overwhelmed the bulk of the police. Now they're in there. All they got to do is get through what, like 10, 20 more police officers, and there they are. There's all the Congress people that they need to beat the shit out of to overthrow the government. Why didn't they?
So they did succeed in delaying the election.
What does that have anything to do with what you said? The goal was to overthrow it.
So
did they overthrow it? Yes or no?
So we were lucky that that Pence was like strong enough to not be
What
afraid.
does that have anything to do with what we're talking about here? Your argument
Because-
was they got in there and they were prepared to use violence. They weren't just trespassing. They were prepared to use violence to get their way. And they had overran the police and they had the numbers to do it. But for some reason, they chose not to. Why?
So there were no politicians in there for first place because luckily they were able to all escape before. So
That's
we
not
don't
true.
even know
There were
if what you,
politicians. That's why we're told that oh shit, why can't I think of her name right now? The woman that was shot. That's why we're told she was shot. They were trying to get into where the politicians were.
Okay, well that means that what I was saying was correct, and we got lucky that the politicians were able to
So
escape.
you're just now
safely.
you're just so you'll admit that what you just said was bullshit there before. You're just making
Well,
things up as you go. When you think
I'm not
politicians are there,
making-
you're like, this proves they were trying to get to the politicians to beat the shit out of them. But when you don't think that, you'll say, oh, no politicians were there. You're just making shit up as you go.
No,
Ashley
so
Babbitt,
you're
I'm sorry.
focusing on the like the little tiny points that aren't really
No, I'm not. What you're
meaningful.
doing is trying to make excuses why people that used lethal means to burn down a precinct, the people that hung around for there were just peaceful. And even if there was curfew called, they were all just peaceful. And it was all big misunderstanding, the vast majority of them. And trust me, a bail fund was just for those peaceful people that should have never been locked up. But everyone that was there on January 6th, even if they were nonviolent, they all actually were violent because they were in the Capitol. And the goal was to use their violent force to overthrow the government, even though you're acknowledging that they had enough violent force to overthrow the government because they already surpassed the police, but they for some reason chose not to. And you're like, well, the reason they chose not
they
to
try
was
to.
because the
They try
politician-
to
Okay, then why didn't they? They easily
Because
had the
the
numbers to
politician-
overwhelm them. Why didn't they?
because there were no politicians that
That's
were
not true.
like in front of them.
That's not true. You just got done saying that yes, they tried to get in with Ashley Babbitt.
No, that is true. Yeah, that's why Ashley Babbitt got shot. Is because she got too close to the politicians.
So then I just
And-
want to be clear. Every politician that said I was cowering under a desk, whatever, they're lying. That didn't happen. None of them were there. Just to be clear. So when we hear Adam Kissinger or AOC, when they talk about that, they're lying. They weren't there.
Yeah, I think they were in a different building at that point, right?
AOC was in a different building, but many of the other people were not.
Yeah, I don't know. All I know is that the security and the officers were able to escort all of the politicians out before any harm came to
Why
them.
didn't they then at least? You're full of shit. You're just wrong. But why didn't they at least then symbolically take over the chambers where the votes were being held? Why didn't they do that?
I think they did do that.
No, they didn't. They went into like the one Senate chamber. I don't think where the vote was being held.
And weren't they like taking pictures?
Why did they?
Of, like,
Why did they just not refuse to leave? They left long before like the National Guard was sent. Why?
Because there's no politicians there to do anything to.
Oh, so they were just like,
So-
we failed. That's it. We failed. Oh well, time to go home. This is bullshit.
Yeah, pretty
What
much.
it is
So
is,
I don't think all of them.
For someone
All,
who's already admitted that you know almost nothing about this other than what the New York Times and CNN told you, I find this hilarious. The truth is that if you're going to judge one group of people because most of them peacefully milled around in the Capitol by saying, but there are a handful that maybe we're going to do something shitty, so therefore we judge them all as incredibly violent. But people that stuck around at a protest that literally burned down a police precinct, you're like, actually, I'm going to give them every benefit of the doubt. And so if there's a bail fund to bail those people out, I'll assume it wasn't for the people that actually engaged in the fire, in the burning down of the police precinct, but it's just those good, noble, peaceful people. Let me ask you this. Let's try a different tactic. If Trump comes out January 8th and says, hey, here's a bail fund for everyone that got arrested January 6th, do you think Democrats would have used that as an example that he was encouraging violence?
maybe.
But you don't think that's what Kamala Harris was doing? She should be held to a
Honestly,
different
yeah,
standard.
maybe that is what she was kind of
Oh!
in a smaller sense, but I still don't
What do you
think
mean
that's like
smaller
nearly
sense?
as.
What do you mean smaller sense? How so?
So I think that trying to overthrow a democracy, the strongest democracy in the world, is
Apparently
way
not
more
that
important.
strong. Apparently not that strong if a bunch of basically unarmed people almost took it over because they were wearing Chewbacca helmets and shit.
Okay, yeah, you're right. But anyways, I think that trying to overthrow the strongest democracy in the world is way bigger of a deal than just burning down
Your
one
buzzword, and
random
again, it's
police
clear that you get
station.
your information from CNN and the New York Times because you're trying to overthrow democracy. That's such a big deal. It's bullshit, right? It's clearly overplaying it. I think they were trying to overthrow democracy on May 30th, 2020. Why are you okay with that? When they had to move
What
Trump,
happened on
you
May
said,
30th?
that was just precaution. That was just okay. You admitted that the reason that they didn't get in was because there was more of a police presence on May 30th. What do you think their goal was? If their goal was to remove Trump, what would you call that? Overthrowing democracy?
Yeah, if they got into the White House, then
Okay,
that
so
would be a
then
really.
violent Democrats tried to overthrow democracy, and
But
Joe
they didn't
Biden's
even get
response,
close.
yeah, because there was an adequate police presence, right?
And also on top of that, hold on top of that, there was no president telling them to go into the White House to do whatever they wanted to do.
No, there were politicians over. No one said go into the Capitol and do whatever you want to do. Can you quote me Trump saying that?
Trump told them to go to. Okay, there is no politician telling them to go to the White House.
Okay, can you show me? So Trump saying go to the Capitol. He didn't tell them to go into the Capitol.
Still, he encouraged them to.
Did he tell them to go into the Capitol?
I would say he did kind of like get them to go into the Capitol as well.
Can you show me the quote?
There's not a direct exact quote.
So he didn't say that. You're just assuming that's what he meant.
Yeah, I'm kind of like reading into.
I'm going to assume that when Democrats were saying that violence is the language of the unheard and these protests were mostly peaceful, and they kept saying that Trump was a racist and a fascist for things he was saying, that was them dog whistling. That was them dog whistling that they wanted their violent agitators to go to the White House. So there, I'll make the same assumption.
Can you admit that they were mostly peaceful?
What was mostly peaceful?
The BLM protests?
Sure. Will you admit that the Trump protesters were even more mostly peaceful?
No.
Okay.
Actually, yeah, I would because there was a lot of them that were there.
So then why are you focused on January 6th if most Trump protests are peaceful? Why are you focused on that one?
Because Trump's involvement in trying to overthrow democracy.
Trump wasn't involved in trying to overthrow democracy. Trump told them to
he was because he told them all to go to the Capitol.
He told them to go peacefully, just like we have litany of Democrats that said even when we saw evidence of violence over and over again, we saw Democrats such as Kamala Harris that said these protests should continue. They should continue up to and after the election. Even when they were seeing the acts of violence, they were promoting bail funds. And Democrats were still saying that shit. So how wasn't that promoting acts of violence?
Yeah, it is. But this conversation took way longer than I was expecting, so I really need to get back to work.
All right. Well, thanks for playing. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I'll talk to you again later.
Mm-hmm. We'll see you.
All right, bye.
Didn't do so. Yeah, he called in. I'll give him that. But his initial claim that there was more violence on January 6th than all the Black Lives Matter, backed out of that real quick, didn't he? Is Discord the only way to call in? Yeah, right now. Theoretically, I could set up a Google Voice number, though mine expired because no one ever used it. But if you want to call in, I'll put the link there, Alex. You can talk about the alternate electors. I know you're chomping at the bit to talk about the alternate electors. Oh boy, say alternate elector. Just say it. Go ahead. You call in. We can talk alternate electors. By the way, notice still, that's all the Democrats have to talk about. Still January 6th. Notice still, that's all they have to talk about. Let's do some super chats while we're waiting. Jet, thanks for the $10. Says, thanks for what you do. I appreciate it, man. I have fun doing it. Thank you. James S. for $10 says, January 6th was like the Reichstag fire. It was allowed to happen and give the establishment an excuse to persecute Trump and his supporters. Thanks for the stream. Couldn't agree more, James. Moonlight, thank you again. Oh, I'm sorry. I should be bringing these up, right? I forgot I could do that. Thank you. Moonlight for $20. Thank you so much. Says the main polarizing force today isn't the quality of media, but the quantity. We can now find that specific flavor media we want since we have more options. We'll get our personalized echo chambers now, less cohesion. Yes, that's partially true, but I don't think that things were much better before this. When I originally went to school, so my first year in college was the fall semester of 2002. I'm 40 years old, so 2002, if you can imagine, way back there. And so that was, the year after 9/11. I'm heading to local state school. I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to be like a news anchor on television. That's what I wanted, or maybe a sports anchor. Those were the two goals that I had. So I had to take all these mass media and journalism classes. And almost all my professors were big Democrat left-wing type people. And the big argument that was being made all the time there was, did you know that 90% of our media is controlled by basically 6 corporations? And they talked about the term gatekeeping all the time. Basically, alternative voices don't have a chance to have their voice heard because everything's curated. And so it seems like there's cohesion because everybody's hearing the same sort of stuff. But actually, any voices outside of that, they don't have a chance to get heard. Landon Manawaring, thanks so much for the $10. Says, unlike the BLM protests, January 6th actually was mostly peaceful. I was there. Yet the lefties make excuses for BLM and demonize January 6th because of democracy. You're right. We've gone through the footage of the day that shows that a lot of the actual violence that occurred that day was actually started by the police. Doesn't justify the people that engaged in acts of violence on the other end of it. But yeah, it was an intentional showing. All right, 1 second. You're going to have to turn your audio off.
Just let me... Big fan, by the way.
Thank you. Were you the one that wanted to talk about the alternate electors? Is that...
No, actually, okay. I'm a Canadian that is kind of having a little bit of a gripe with these tariffs in this current situation. Mostly for Donald Trump's positions, I tend to support a lot of it, to be quite honest. Mm-hmm. But like, I can't seem to wrap my head around that one.
Okay, so I'll talk about this. I will, but I will say, sort of a bummer because we were on one topic and this is a complete different topic. But I guess I'll talk about this a little first. When it comes to the idea of the tariffs about the fentanyl, I did a show about it yesterday that you could check out that I don't think that Trump's explained himself enough. When it comes to the reciprocal tariffs, I don't have a problem with that. Canada has exploited the United States with tariffs and other such things for a long time. You're not going to have an exact tit for tat. For example, if Canada mass imports vehicles but doesn't export vehicles to the United States, if they put a 200% tariff on vehicles, it wouldn't make sense for Trump to say, then we're going to tariff your vehicles at 200% because Canada would say, sweet, we don't send you any vehicles. So when you see a lot of agricultural products that you see high levels of tariffs on from Canada putting on U.S. exporters, then it would make sense to be reciprocal, why Trump would then say, unless you take those tariffs off, we're going to put tariffs on things that you export. I ultimately don't like tariffs, and I wish cooler heads would prevail, and Canada would say, yeah, we're going to start removing our tariffs. Instead, they're like, well, then we'll tariff you more.
Which is a fair and understandable, but like, what I kind of want to press on is like, us Canadians, we haven't had the chance really to get rid of our quote unquote our Democrats, our liberal government, and we're having an election between now and next October, right? And we're like, the Liberal Party's lost all support, and they've done nothing but destroy this country. And like, you guys caught your Donald Trump to start doing shit, and it's like, it's almost like, shit, give us like 6 months to like 8 months to get our shit together, because once we get our conservative leadership, it's going to be a completely different ballgame. But I think what you're doing now is causing our conservative party and our liberal party to kind of like come up together and be like, look, listen, if you fuck around and you find out, we're going to tariff the potash, we're going to, we're going to fight back, right? And I don't think that like, that's gonna be a good place to be with the relationship between Canada and the United States, because we've literally driven down our dollar. At one point, we brought the dollar up almost to the U.S. dollar. Alberta alone. I'm a heavy duty mechanic in Alberta, working the oil fields and shit. But we brought the dollar up to on par, and we actually had to bring it down to 75 cents on the dollar to make manufacturing profitable in our country and do business with you guys and make it, lucrative for you to do so. So it's like we've always positioned ourselves to be like good. We lose 200 I think it's $200 billion a year in selling oil only to be refined to purchase it back. Like, there's many different things that we need to do here that like will help us be better off. But it's like, now you're pissing us off, and like what, like, and the problem is you have a lot of good people in Western Canada. The problem is Ontario and Quebec, that's the Liberal leadership, and it's a large population, so they have all the seats. So it's basically mob rule. So we're along for the ride until they decide to change their mind. So it's like you're hurting all the people that support you because, like,
now so I don't disagree. I think that you're right that likely what's going to happen is, how do you say his name? Polyev was going to Polyev was going to win, and this probably makes that more unlikely. And that's true. And I say this with all due respect. I don't give one fuck at all. I'm sorry. I don't care that Canada is ran by a bunch of elitist, leftist fucking scumbags, and that the argument needs to be allow them to continue to exploit your country for 6 more months with the hope that we could get a less elitist scumbag in there who will maybe be more favorable before.
Yeah, but they're talking like a sub 15% approval rating versus conservatives at over 75. Like, you think you had a red wave? We're gonna have our conservatives are blue, so it'd be a blue wave here. But like I'm not sure you realize that.
I don't give a shit. That would be like saying, like, Rob, trust me, allow your landlord to continue to exploit you for 6 more months because we think that you'll get a slightly better landlord after that. Yeah, I don't give a shit. Stop ripping me off. I don't care. If the argument is Canada,
I can sympathize with that.
Now hear me out, right? So if the argument is, well, Trump can't advocate for reciprocal tariffs between now and then because Canada is so fucking stupid and weak, which, by the way, it's continued to elect these left-wing globalists that have been even worse than the American ones that had won it in the past, if you believe it or not.
I know that.
They'll go from the precipice of saying, geez, we've had enough of this shit, to, we'll show those Americans by electing even more ridiculous left-wing globalists. I'm unpersuaded, and I don't give a shit.
I can guarantee you right now that you're going to have a conservative government, and every time you do, the oil field in Alberta, which this is what happens in Canada, is Alberta subsidizes the entire country. There's transfer payments out of this province because of oil, right? And it subsidizes the entirety of Quebec and Ontario. And because people like to get free handouts, and they have the population to dictate, hey, I want said free handout and you're going to pay for it. It's destroyed.
Then why were they going to lose? Then they would have won anyways, right?
No, because what they've done is hampered the oil field. And what happens is when all the guys in Alberta can get to go to work and work overtime and work 24 days on, 4 days off, 15, 16-hour days, paying all that overtime and all that tax money that then like generates a lot of revenue for the government to do its, healthcare and other social shit that it's basically failing at. But
so
it benefits everybody.
The argument is 6 months from now, everything would be fixed. The tariffs that can't.
Well, the fentanyl issue. Hold on, the fentanyl issue. I think in 6 months, when we get our conservative leadership, the immigration. We're not for the immigration shit. We have the same bullshit that fucking you guys have on your southern border, but the only difference is it's legal, and it's actually something you should use as an arguing point, because in Canada, like the Democrats you have just wanted to make it a legal process to bring these illegal immigrants in. Canada's done that process and brings these immigrants in, and to the point where our prime minister actually had to come out and admit that he fucked shit up. So it's like, immigration is a huge issue, and we do less than 1% goes through the Canadian border, so it's just a fentanyl issue, and I guarantee you that issue is going to be solved with our conservative government. Like, we're going to come down and say, hey, this is an issue.
How about the reciprocal tariffs?
Well, I mean, if Donald Trump and Polyev want to get at a table, I think those two reasonable minds can bring those tariffs off.
Then why don't they do that now? Why is
Because
Polyev?
we don't. Well, for a while, what we've had is since Justin Trudeau's been stepping down, now we have Mark Carney, but basically it froze our government entirely. So like nothing's happening anyways.
But I
right?
mean, Trudeau just stepped down like what, 3 days ago?
No, yeah, officially 3 days ago, but it's been over like 3 months of us having like gridlock.
Polyev could have went to Trump, even knowing that gridlock, knowing that he's the opposite.
You know what?
leader.
He should. Like, but I don't think
I just find it. Like if your argument, someone's saying, Legatus is full of shit, by the way. He's saying the reciprocal tariffs aren't real. He talked about the dairy ones. Let me make Legatus's argument. Well, actually, it turns out that those 200% tariffs only hit at a certain point, and that's designed to protect the domestic producers in Canada. And so the vast majority of dairy that's being sent to Canada actually isn't tariffed at that rate whatsoever. Right, but the argument would be that's because the exporters know that it's not profitable for them to send any more because it would meet those tariffs. So just because they voluntarily stop because they know it would no longer be profitable doesn't mean that those tariffs aren't having a negative effect on the farmers in the United States that would like to sell that. If there was no need for those tariffs, then the tariffs wouldn't be there. Clearly, the tariffs are there because Canada knows that other countries, and predominantly the United States, would like to ship more there, and so these tariffs are put there as a bulwark to make sure that they're incapable of doing that. So no, it's not just a talking point. Right, the United States has tariffs on things like sugar as well, but it's not completely reciprocal, which is the argument that Trump and them are making. If you want to make the specific argument that you don't think that it's like, we could clearly see that there's a massive trade imbalance. If you want to make the argument that you don't think tit for tat exactly what Trump's saying is true, so be it. But we can see the levels of those tariffs. We do. If that's the argument you want to make, though, at least that's an argument. The argument that's like, well, okay, yeah, there haven't been reciprocal tariffs, right? Canada's tariffed the United States more, but you should not do anything for about 6 months about it so that we could get through our elections. I just don't give a shit. Mexico could maybe say the same thing, maybe the UK, maybe Germany. I don't give a fuck. I don't at all. As the country that has been on the losing side of those tariffs, I don't care for the argument, let us continue to exploit you for months until our election's over. I just don't give a shit. It's just completely
unpersuasive. Are we exploiting you, or are you guys exploiting us?
Well, if the tariffs are non-reciprocal, then it would be Canada exploiting the United States.
Yeah, but we put a pause. I think there's been a pause put on that for a little bit. So it seems like Donald Trump wants to get something.
Dinkle says, it would seem like a fat guy like you would be opposed to tariffs. Well, I don't know why my weight would make me more likely to be opposed to tariffs, but I am opposed to tariffs. I actually am. I think that I don't mind using them as a bargaining chip. But ultimately what I would like to see is all the tariffs, and for that matter, subsidies, be taken off the board in countries around the world. That's what I would like to see. I think more free trade is good. But it's undoubtable that there are countries around the world that tariff, for example, European countries that tariff our automobile market crazily, like 200, 250%. Right? And then when there's reciprocal, when there's suggested of any sort of reciprocal tariffs, it's like, no, you can't do that. What I do know is that the manufacturing base in the United States has been absolutely fucking gutted. Absolutely destroyed. Now our big exports are what? Dollars? Because
don't get me wrong. Like I'm in agreement with wanting to bring manufacturing back. You know, you can't run a fiat currency forever and not eventually end up in a war where you're going to reestablish the monetary system. This has happened time and time again throughout history. You need your manufacturing. You need your steel. I get it, but it's like there's other bigger fish to fry than the phytoplankton that sits on your fucking back, right?
I disagree. I disagree because every country will make that argument. Don't you think the UK would say that? Don't you think every NATO country would say that? Don't you think every
No, but Canada's a little. Yeah, I would agree, but that's different because Canada's positioned in the same geological fucking part of the world.
Even
right,
worse.
We're just right above you. Right, we have the same oceans protecting us. We're protecting your north.
When your brother stabs you in the back, that's even worse than when a stranger does it. Right.
How are we stabbing you in the back?
Well, if the argument is that these tariffs are non-reciprocal, that's what we would be talking about. If the argument is that Canada,
what initiated
Canada, for example, And much like all of these other countries that have more socialist policies than the United States, they brag about their social policies like healthcare, which is a disaster in many ways, as I'm sure you know. But one of the reasons that they're able to have those funds is because they rely on the United States military for defense, right? Canada's in that boat as well. So, like all I'm arguing, if someone wants to make a compelling case to me that actually, no, Canada hasn't been tariffing the United States unfairly, I'm willing to listen to that. But the argument of, well, maybe that's true, but wait 6 months, I don't give a fuck. I just
I have to double check what the chessboard is at the moment, but as I've been seeing this unfold, from my perspective, it seems like Donald Trump's like, okay, we haven't really sat down and negotiated shit with you guys, but I'm gonna put fucking 25% tariffs. So like, where's the meeting? Where's the sit down? Where's the, hey, deal with the fucking fentanyl at the border? We sent more troops to the border. We have less than 1% of your illegal immigration comes from fucking Canada. Like, you can't stop everyone across a vast fucking goddamn, like, large. People will get by, drugs get smuggled, shit happens, right? You can't catch every single human being. But if it's less than 1% and your issues at your southern fucking border, right? That's what I don't understand. Like, we're talking, like, is this the fentanyl problem? Is it really all the fentanyl that's coming through Canada? I'm not too entirely sure or convinced that that's true. I know it's less than 1% of immigration, so it's like, even the amount of people bringing the drugs, like, you have to have volume of people moving to move the drugs. I think it's all coming through your southern border. I don't think that I can't. If you can show me, I will agree with you. But like, is fentanyl really coming to a large degree? Like, maybe it is, but you're not having the volume of people to fucking move it. And trust me, my nickname used to be the duffel bag boy because 10, 15 years ago, I didn't used to live a clean life. So like, I understand how product gets moved and where it gets moved from Canada into the United States.
I did a whole show yesterday, and a large portion of it was, I think Trump needs to better explain himself on the fentanyl thing. My guess is what he was looking was for some PR victory and some sort of trust and movement that, look, we need to spur these people to do something, because it still is a problem that fentanyl is coming through the northern border. So I think he was looking for some sort of cooperation. And instead, what he's been met with is hostility from Trudeau, and then Bolivier, or however you pronounce his name, is forced to, and I don't disagree with him, he has to be Canadian first. That's exactly what I would expect. So he's like, no, we're going to be hardline too. And so then Trump's gonna be like, okay, then we're going to be hardline.
And the thing is, though, like, I think everyone kind of has an opposition to these elitist types, and one thing I do have to throw a bone for Polyev. The guy was basically orphaned as a child, got taken in by a family, fucking, like, pretty much grown up in Alberta, dirt fucking poor, right? So like, he still has the taste of poor on his tongue. You know what I mean? He still remembers it. Lots of these people are born into money and just perpetually destroy and don't have any touch with the common man. And I understand, like, Canada needs to fucking get its shit together. We need to actually start building refineries within our own fucking shit, get our LNG. We can be selling that shit to Germany, so Russia doesn't have to Germany doesn't have to be dependent on Russia for LNG and shit like that. We don't need to be losing $200 billion a year to the United States so you guys can refine our oil only so we can fucking buy it back. We have every fucking resource known to man in Canada.
Well, that's not necessarily true. That's why
Canada, for to a large degree, not like
they're not. Canada's in a weaker bargaining position because they have far less self-sustainability than the United States. I don't know.
I would disagree with that.
Well, then Canada will be fine.
Like, the problem with Canada is the same problem the United States has been having for a long time. You have a bunch of elitists that keep fucking shit up for you, right? You can have all the resources in your backyard, but if people are gonna not allow you to tap into it and build out the infrastructure, you're kind of fucked.
But again, that's part and parcel to what's going on. I can't tell you the rare earth metals in Canada. I would assume that you have a lot of lumber. I would assume that you have a lot of energy production, right? But I don't know.
Literally have everything.
I don't believe that's true. I just don't believe that. I don't even think the United States has everything. Like, it's clear that trade's necessary for certain things, that it's more profitable to bring in from other countries than to...
We got uranium, iron ore, potash, natural gas, oil,
I guess you'll
lumber.
Be fine. I guess you'll be fine.
Like, we need to turn the what I ideally want is the United States to be a huge manufacturing base, and I want Canada to be a huge resource extraction base. So we give you our fucking resources. You can build whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah, but it's not going to happen because no matter what, we'll be told, just wait 6 more months until the election goes this way. Trust us. Fuck all that. By
No,
way,
dude, the whole world. No, you have to. Hold on. You have to look at trends. You have to look at trends. Dude, I called your election. Fucking.
I don't give a fuck.
And it was, dude. I called it to a T.
Don Jr. would be. If your argument is, trust me, dude, Don Jr. will win prime minister in 6 months. Trust me, I've seen it. I still don't give a shit. It is not a persuasive.
Okay, I traded
a persuasive argument to me that yes.
I'm just saying, dude, I put my money where my fucking mouth is. I traded 10K Bitcoin on 100x leverage on the Bybit exchange on election night because of Donald Trump.
This has nothing to do with anything, right?
No. It has nothing to do with anything, but what you have to do is be able to look into the world and see a pattern and recognize when things are happening.
I don't give a shit. Right?
What do you mean you don't give a shit?
I'm conceding that you're probably right that Bolivia would have won. So you saying, no, here's my bona fides. I'm really good with Bitcoin. And I predicted Trump would win. That's irrelevant to what I'm saying because I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. It looks like the Conservative Party
But this isn't just a phenomenon that's happening in the United States. This is something that's happening worldwide, my friend.
Totally got it. That is irrelevant and I don't give a shit whatsoever. I don't give a shit. If the argument is actually, I've already defended one of your arguments. I think that Trump on this fentanyl shit has not been clear enough. I think that it's ridiculous and he should have been more clear. If the argument is, trust me, dude, the tariffs have been reciprocal. The United States has been taking advantage of Canada and Trump's blowing smoke up your ass. I'm willing to listen, though. I will admit the brief research that I've done seems to be that there's been far more goods tariffed when it comes to a dollar amount from the Canadian side than the United States side in the past. But I'm willing to hear that.
Yeah, but we're at a 300 million plus population versus a 30 million plus population, right? Like the
argument that you're making,
the dollar doesn't.
The argument that you're making is no. Maybe that's all true, but give us 6 months till we win the election. I don't give a fuck about that at all. I just don't care, and I know that sucks for you. But I just don't give a shit.
Do you want to shoot potential allies in the foot? Like, because at the end of the day, hold on. If you have people that have the same ideology, the same want to deal with the same problems, the same conservative fucking mindset, you want to burn all those fucking bridges so that when we fucking get our conservative government, we're going to turn around and be like, fuck you. You don't get to fuck us for 200 billion a fucking year. You know what? We're going to fucking ship our fucking oil elsewhere. You need the fucking bitumen to make diesel for all your shit, so fuck you guys. We can turn around and all the potash you fucking need for your fertilizer for your people. Fuck you guys can starve and die. Fuck you. You know what I mean? Do you really is that what you want? I don't think that fighting for the sake of absolute destruction back and forth is necessarily beneficial to both parties. We can fight to the death. That doesn't mean it's like the fucking Israel-Palestine situation. Those people are going to fight for no reason.
And the other thing, like your space program, SpaceX and Tesla and things like that, Starlink, it will be so much better here. And Canadians will literally send all their best hockey players to the cities that you want, and you'll literally win every hockey championship from here on out. And the NHL is going to grow immensely, and they can put it in cities across the country. And we're going to send all of our best teachers there. Our entire military will then be at your disposal. You could do whatever. Every Canadian will personally send every American checks for $500.
You think we want to be a part of America?
Do you want me to keep? Do you want me to keep going?
Hold on. Do you not realize we burnt down the White House once? We can do it again. The Geneva checklist. The Geneva checklist was created because of Canadians.
Are you hearing things? Where did I say that Canada wanted to be part of America? Can you quote that?
No, but hasn't Donald Trump say Canada's going to become the 51st state? Hold on, did he not say, hold on, address my point, did he not say we're going to be the 51st state?
So what you've done is you've showed your arrogance, and you continue to talk about things that are non sequiturs when I continue to tell you that the things you're talking about
I take people at their word, man.
They are irrelevant to me. You continue to just double down on, trust me, Poilievre is going to win, and there's trends because I've been really good at Bitcoin, and I predicted Donald Trump, and I'm like, yeah, I can circumvent all this because I don't give a shit about all that. Just like when you keep keep saying,
It's
but
it's
trust
it's
me,
understanding. Oh my God.
bro. If you just choose to leave us keep fucking you over for 6 months, bro, trust us. Then if you
Who
just
says
let
we're
us,
you
then
have
we'll get
you
it.
have
Trust
yet
us if you
failed to
just leave us get
establish
it.
how we're fucking
And
you
again,
over.
like here
You
you
have
go.
failed to
You're
establish how
incapable. You're
Canada is
incapable of
fucking
following
us
a
over,
conversation
fucking you
because you're
over.
too busy blowing smoke up everyone's ass about how good you are at Bitcoin and how good you are at predicting trends and shit. Because if you were listening, you would have
Let
heard the
you
following.
ramble for. I'll
One,
let you
I'm
go.
agreeing with you. When it comes to the fentanyl thing. Second, if your argument is that Canada is not actually fucking over the United States, I'm willing to hear that argument and have a discussion and look into the evidence of that. But if your argument is, sure, Canada is fucking over the United States, but don't do anything about it for 6 months because of
don't
this
think
election, then I find that to be absurd. You're then now saying, but prove that Canada's fucking over the United States, going back to argument 2, which I said I would be willing to have a discussion about argument 2.
hey,
What
well,
I'm taking umbrage with,
relax for a second.
is
Relax.
your point. Don't tell me to fucking relax. Go fuck yourself, hoser. Like you're the one sitting here crying, "Oh my God, we're gonna have the libtards in charge again because we're begging the United States not to have reciprocal tariffs because it'll mean that the libtards will win again." Don't tell me to relax. Go fuck yourself. It's
I'm not.
my show.
That's
Start
not
your
the
own
position
show.
I had.
Start
You're
your own
literally like
show, hoser.
misrepresenting
Before
what
you
I
call
said.
in crying to me about this
You
shit,
you
you can
you
start your own.
misrepresenting. You're
I've
misrepresenting.
listened quite well to what you're saying. So the point I'm trying to make is I've been polite about saying the entire time, despite the fact that you want to keep rambling on this story. And Canada will help the United States with this, and they'll help them with this, and they'll help them with this. All of that is unpersuasive to me from the point of this argument. If it's true that Canada is currently screwing over the United States right now, and your
I don't
argument
think
is,
it is.
but okay, you don't think it is, but what I'm saying is the argument you're making is a third argument, which is even if that's true, please don't do anything for 6 months so that the right people can win our elections. I find that to be unpersuasive.
That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying like you came up to us and pulled a fucking gun and pointed at our face, and you're getting mad that we're unholstering a gun and pointing it right back at yours.
I'm not getting mad at all. I'm not the one calling.
No. Can
you show me the
literally
Canadian
the position.
show that I
Hold
called
on.
into begging to stop this because it'll interfere with our election? Can you show me when I've done that?
I didn't say it was going to interfere with our election. I said we're having a right swing in our country, and you're going to shoot yourself in the foot when we do have conservative fucking leadership, and we do have access to the potash that you need to fertilize your fucking fields to feed your people, which you're doing a horrible job of as it stands. And I don't think a lot of Americans would love to just start dying of starvation.
I'll bet. Who do you think would be harmed more by a trade war, the United States or Canada?
Honestly, I think the United States, to be honest.
I think for someone who's so good at predicting trends, I think you're very fucking awful at this.
Why? We don't spend half of the entirety of our fucking budget on fucking military.
That we're importing.
We actually could put it towards our resources, towards our people, towards more of our stuff.
So
why is it that Canada weathered the 2008 financial fucking crash you had, where your monetary system fucking derailed, right? And it's just been quantitative easing since.
First off, what would that have anything to do whatsoever with who would solve a trade or do?
No, if you're going to talk about how well each country's going to fare off in catastrophic events that have already happened, we fared off better. Right? We have a higher average IQ. We got all the resources that fucking most countries fucking need. So at the end of the day, we are always going to be fine. But at the end of the day, do you want to fuck a good business partner?
I think you're full of shit, and Canada knows.
You have yet to demonstrate how anything I said is factually incorrect.
Because the trade imbalance is so bad when it comes to the export market of Canada. The United States is by far and away the hugest chunk of that. But when it comes to the export and import market from the United States to and from Canada, Canada is small potatoes compared to the rest of the trade partners we have around the world. So United States is
from your perspective, you're obviously a larger population, a larger country. But if we're talking about a system that organically supports the people that it has, you have a larger fucking duty and requirement for all those fucking human beings. We don't need as much money. We don't need as much as the United States does to actually keep fucking going. So at the end of the day, we're talking more about proportionality, right? If you're going to tariff us to a certain position, and then you're saying, oh, you're doing greater numbers. Well, I don't know. Your country's fucking 10 times larger, so maybe it's proportional.
Okay, man, then you'll be good. What's the upset? You're saying conservatives will win anyways.
No, I'm just saying you're shooting yourself in the foot for future for the future. Yes, you are. You are.
You're shooting your argument is as follows. Correct me if I'm wrong. Conservatives are going to win anyways.
Yes.
But they're going to shoot themselves in the foot by being pissed at Trump. So they're going to shoot themselves in the foot going into the future.
No, well, they're not going to shoot themselves in the foot. What they're going to do is fucking build the LNG pipelines that go all across fucking Canada. Okay. We're going to what you're going to do is disrupt a large portion of the fucking global market. And you're already losing control of your financial market.
How is that not Canada shooting themselves in the foot? If the
how is it? No, that's not, dude. You got to zoom out and look at fucking how empires fucking rise and fall, and you have the shift. You have the shift. You have the shift.
Go ahead.
Hold on, just give me a sec. Give me a sec. Give me a second.
Let's set the stage. You, as someone who knows that actually the United States benefits more from the trade partnership with Canada than vice versa, even though pretty much everyone, even Canadians, say that's bullshit, but you alone are able to zoom out and see that's the case. Now you're going to set the stage. We're zooming out. We're looking at empires, and we're going to see how if conservatives win anyways in Canada, and they decide, well, fuck Trump, we're not going to deal with him because of these tariffs that he had. That's not shooting them in the foot.
What
but it
happens
the United States is
40 years down the fucking line when when you do not possess the world reserve fucking currency anymore? When your empire is beginning to it's falling apart from within. The assets have fucking flown through the fucking roof without a fucking major recession, but people can't afford to live. People can't afford to fucking have children. So you're trying to tell me that this is going to be a sustainable fucking model that perpetuates itself into the future indefinitely. The United States dollar has lost 98% of its fucking purchasing power, and this experiment is on its way out. The fucking the Dutch Empire lasted about 250 years, give or take 20-30. Oh, because you don't see the big picture. You don't want to see that you're playing fucking checkers, and I'm trying to fucking play chess with you, man. Look at the big board.
I assure you ain't playing no fucking chess.
Oh, brother.
So let's go on with some of the things you said. First, I could bring up a bunch of reasons why, for the very reasons that you're criticizing the United States, that Canada's worse. For example, we could look at GDP numbers, we could look at the value of the currency, etc., and see Canada since the pandemic has done far worse.
Since 74, it's been fucked.
Please. We can see that how it's been far worse even since 2020 than the United States in almost any objective measure. Now, you could look at other things that I would criticize for the very reasons that you're saying the United States isn't sustainable, would be things like manufacturing and not caring about their domestic base and having open borders. And all of those factors, Canada's been far worse than the United States. Now, the way that you'll play chess to get out of this argument is to say, yes, but we're electing people that will be different. We're going to get the libtards out.
No, that's not that is not what the position I'm going to take. Okay. Actually, what I'm going to tell you is pre-1974 in Canada, we used the Bank of Canada as intended, and we borrowed money at near 0% interest and funded fucking our society. We put people to work, and we forced that money to have value. And when you're productive with the money, and it's not in an economic model where you can speculate on the money, which was what happened in 74, because you guys going off the fucking gold standard and us being a good little fucking vassal state, right? So the problem is how our monetary system's structured. No one's ever going to fucking deal with that problem. So at the end of the day, what you have here and in the United States is the inevitable fucking fall of the West, and that's going to happen. Fucking quote me. It's not a matter of if; it's a matter of goddamn fucking when.
Yes, the
and
United States will become that fucking road, and JD
not having resources, not having fucking industry, not having whatever. Hold on. I'm just advocating for Donald Trump at this point. Just relax for a second. You don't realize this is why. This is why. Hold on, dude. Hold on. This is why Donald Trump needs to bring manufacturing back to the United States. This is why he needs this shit. So he's playing a longer game that most people can't actually understand. You want to argue against me, but like some of the shit we're on the same fucking page.
So now I'm going to go ahead and talk. Yes, I understand the U.S. being the world reserve currency is a deal that's been bad for the United States since probably around 60s or 70s. Prior to that, there was this idea that what was good for GM was actually good for the United States. So being the world police and having the world reserve currency was actually beneficial to people in the United States. However, since then, we've outsourced manufacturing. That's the exact reason that we've elected Donald Trump. And you can see that JD Vance in 2023 is talking specifically about the problems when he's talking to Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Fed, about the U.S. being the world reserve currency. That's why the United States has been bringing in gold like crazy since Trump's won, and that's one of the things that the tariff structure is sentenced to do. It's transitioning from a world where the United States is the world reserve currency to having more stable things like gold, which the United States has far more of than Canada. So the idea will be that we'll increase things like manufacturing because this tariffing will ensure that people come to the United States to build these businesses, which will increase the U.S. manufacturing base. The idea that
you have all the resources for all your manufacturing.
Yes, we certainly have the resources of manufacturing far greater than
no, not the resources of manufacturing. I'm saying the resources needed, like the fucking steel to fucking produce the stuff, the ore to take out of the fucking ground. You have everything you need.
As much as you're claiming that Canada does everything that they need.
Well, why is it that you need Canada for certain resources?
Why is it that Canada needs the United States for far more? That's what I thought.
Don't you need, doesn't 95% of your potash, where does 95% of your potash come from?
So what? There's all sorts of things that 95% come from the United States to Canada. That's why.
Yeah, but when we're talking about something as essential as fucking, fertilizing soil so you can eat food, so you can be productive. I think that and on a hierarchy, on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Hold on, hold on.
Don't tell me to hold on. Right. So the point I'm making here is that you can see that the United States is bringing back the manufacturing. Now we can see. Worse than a liberal, like you're from fucking Canada, hoser. How's your country doing? So we can see by all objective metrics that
I'm a conservative Canadian that works in the oil field, but
doing far worse.
People make me make sure you got heat on.
Now listen,
food on your table. You better pay some respect.
I know, bag man, right? That used to live a less reputable life. We get you, bag man, right? I'm sure you fentanyl's not coming across the border. We got you, dude. Anyways, making the point, you can see that Canada, by almost any objective metrics, doing worse. The only thing that I took umbrage with was your idea that you're about to get politicians that are going to change the direction of Canada. Now you try to weasel out of that when I show, well, that's exactly what we do in the United States, right? So you're saying, no, that's not the point. The point is that what's going to happen is because of what Donald Trump's doing, that you're going to switch off the dollar as the reserve currency in Canada. That's your argument?
No. I'm saying that the overall trend is that direction, right? Irrespective of what Canada, the United States, and what's going on, this is just the overall trajectory of a fucking empire and this type of fiat currency. So if you're not forging fucking alliances for when time comes and you want to make enemies of people who have similar interests I do not think that's a good thing.
That's what
I think that's a fair position.
You're saying that Canada will continue to be, that the conservatives are going to win anyways in 6 months, but they're going to continue to be the enemies of the United States.
Well, if you put all these fucking tariffs on us and piss off, listen, didn't we fucking burn the fucking White House down once? Wasn't the Geneva Convention fucking, or Geneva checklist created because of 90% of things that Canadians did in trench warfare? Are we really people to be fucked with?
Yes.
Are we really that fucking nice?
Yes.
Do you really know the type of anger that we possess? Because we're so nice all the time, but when we finally snap, buddy,
listen to you, a dude that
we burned it down once, we'll burn it down again if we need to.
Canada's in a position to take over the United States militaristically. You won't even
brother,
be speaking French.
You guys can't figure out your gender, man. In your country, you literally, your roads, your infrastructure, everything. You spend all this fucking money, but it's like the biggest fucking shithole. You have healthcare where if you're uninsured, you pay $1,200 for a fucking ambulance, or if you're insured, it's $2,200.
The healthcare system in Canada is better than the United States?
I would say. Right now, since we have a ton of immigration, if you do not have a general practitioner or a doctor, you're kind of fucked. But we actually create the best heart surgeons. They come from Canada. Your heart surgeons that you get in the United States, they come from Canada.
So your argument is, wow, healthcare in the United States sucks because of how your administration's been set up for years and years, and it's led to this shit. But it's even worse for us in Canada. But trust us,
that's not what I said. That's not what I said. I didn't say that. I said it is pretty good. It is exceptionally well if you already have a doctor. But if you're one of these fucking immigrants that came in, that's like putting so much pressure pressure, and I know you can understand this when immigrants come into an area, right? You have this issue in the United States when you bring all these people in one area. It's not like you have more living space, more doctors, more schools. It puts a strain on the system. This is an issue that happens. So it's like it's happened to you guys in the United States. So you want to say and sit on, oh my God, you have the shittiest healthcare ever, and wave your hands in the air when it's a simple fucking problem when you're bringing too many immigrants in and you're not building your society quick enough to sustain them. If you only build 200,000 fucking homes a year, why are you bringing in 2 million immigrants? That is more of an administrative issue than a critique of the system and how it works.
You speak out of both sides of your mouth. You say, yes, the way it's being done in Canada right now is terrible, but that's an easy fix. We'll easy fix it. But in the United States, I wasn't the one that waved my hands about how bad the Canadian healthcare system was. You were the one that waved your hands about how bad the U.S. healthcare system was. Then when I ask you point blank, are you saying that Canada's healthcare system's better? You're like, well, actually, there are a lot of problems.
Does a single Canadian have fucking medical debt? Does a single Canadian suffer from medical debt? Can you? Zero. Not a single fucking Canadian.
They're asked to kill themselves.
Suffer from medical debt. Zero. And you know what's something that's interesting? You know what's another thing that's interesting?
Because the Canadian government tells you to kill yourself.
How
they're not in debt then.
Oh my God, that's these left-card liberals, brother. That's not me in my position or us conservatives.
Your argument is that you're ran by the left-card liberals that are doing this shit, but we can't look at the way your country's being operated.
Okay, you had Biden, so I have to subscribe every fucking position Biden had with you. Because Biden was your leader, right? That's how ignorant that you're going to be.
That's exactly what you're doing. You're looking at that.
That's what you're doing, Yahmar. That's exactly what you're fucking doing.
Has Trump had a chance to reform the healthcare system?
You're never going to reform the healthcare system in the United States.
Oh, why is that?
Never.
So we need socialized medicine like Canada. Tell me again.
No. The problem is the United States is based absolutely on fucking capitalism. It doesn't matter if you climb over your fucking neighbor to get up top. That is by nature how all your shit's designed.
I will take capitalism over your fucking Mr. Conservative socialism any day. Yes.
It's not what socialism. The thing is, dude, do you not pay taxes? Do you not pay taxes? Do you not pay taxes? Yes. Would you like to get something back for the money that they fucking take from you?
I would like to pay way less taxes and get more things that are relevant to me back. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everyone gets old and sick.
Yep. So you're for socialized medicine.
To a large degree, but I'm not for socialized medicine. Just wait. Just let me finish my statement. I have an issue with it being on the backs of middle class taxpayers. The time that the United States was the best and well, I mean, not the best, but like if you look at in terms of growth, right? From the 50s onward, right? And you had absolute growth since then. You want to know the tax rate of like the largest fucking corporations and shit? You had the fucking like 96%, 94% back in the fucking day, right? Henry Ford fucking doubled the fucking wages of his factory. Fucking that's the beginning of when everything fucking took off, right? So you had this huge socialized fucking system that perpetuated fucking wealth for how many fucking goddamn fucking years? And don't give me this fucking socialism bullshit. It's only capitalism for the poor and socialism for the rich in both of our fucking countries, right? When lobbyists lobby $4.4 billion and get over $4 trillion in fucking government fucking funding or creation of new fucking funds, however you want to slice that pie, so they can have their capitalistic endeavors and gobble up all the assets while they debase your currency. Yeah.
Now, I think that you're for socialized medicine and I'm not. Pretty simple, right?
Yeah, I mean, we can agree to disagree there for many reasons.
The 95% tax rate's bullshit. No one ever paid tax rates at that. Even when the tax rate
I'll bring that up
States,
for you.
Okay,
I'll bring that up.
Right. Even if that was the tax rate, there were so many loopholes that no one actually paid that. Not true. So the effective tax rate was actually... You're saying that the effective tax rate in the United States...
Here, I have to find it exactly. You know how shit you read... You know how you read shit and it like goes to the back of your mind and it's like, fuck, you try to pull it out of the bag and it's like, fuck, I gotta look this up before I start fucking opening my mouth too much because I don't remember a lot.
So your claim, I just want to be sure, your effective tax rate you're saying was 95% in this country.
For the ultra rich, for the 1%.
Okay. At what point was that?
I believe through the 50s through 60s on
44 to 45 was the highest. It was 90%. That was
yeah.
what
Sorry,
the tax rate was, but there were so many loopholes that no one ever actually paid that.
Are you sure that no one paid that?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'll grant that. So I got to look more into it more. But
So,
that's
for example,
fucking.
in 40, we can see that the effect, according to Tax Policy Center at the Brookings Institution, in 1945, the top 0.01% was paying a slightly below 50% tax rate. Today, they're paying around a 30%. So, no, they weren't paying 95.
So they're paying 50%. Now they're paying less. And the problem is now,
What are
too,
they paying in Canada?
Hold up. Fuck, a lot more, too.
How's that working for businesses in Canada?
But here, can I one thing I want to change in the United States is you gotta fucking get rid of that fucking tax deferral thing with commercial real estate, because if you buy a property for fucking $2 million and you fucking get a tenant in there and fucking fix it up and make it worth 2.5, then you do a mortgage back refinance, take 500,000 out tax free, sell the property for 2.5 million, do a 1031 or a 1041, I forget what it is, I'm not familiar with your code as much, but you do a tax deferral and you can indefinitely do this until you have a fucking empire of fucking real estate, and then you pay your fucking taxes. So when you look at the fucking numbers and they're like, oh yeah, they pay their taxes, but when do they fucking pay their taxes? After they've fucking gobbled up all the fucking real estate.
Yeah, there's all sorts of problems with that sort of stuff. That's what having these high tax rates do. It ends up meaning that the people that aren't effectively able to use those loopholes get fucked over. That's why things like socialized medicine are bad. The larger you make the government and the more socialization that you have, or socialism that you have within it, what it does is it allows people to lobby and create loopholes that the actual wealthy could take advantage of. That's exactly what's going on. That's why in Canada, when you would cheer for something like socialized medicine, what ends up happening is you have death panels where they're recommending that people
that. I don't think it's as simple as that.
Well, it's largely the way it's playing out. Like the healthcare
yeah,
system
it's
in
playing
Canada
out like that, but hold on.
It's unworkable. And again, I'd still.
But I have a comparison to make in Canada. I have a before and after, right? I have a system. I have a system in which the banking fucking because the thing is what I find asinine is if money is created by means of law, why do you give it to a private entity to produce for your country at interest?
We shouldn't have a Federal Reserve. Got it? And
doesn't that create the market forces that allow speculation? Because if you have, you can borrow at 0% interest from your central bank and your people to work versus but hold on, but doesn't that build you into the system and bake in all the speculation that could happen? And then the capitalist fucking mindset finds the gap and destroys everything. That brings it. Yes.
No. These sorts of things could happen in a world without a Federal Reserve also. The bigger the government is, the more regulation, the more that you're forced to give your labor and the value of it to a government, the more room for exploitation there is. And the rich and powerful will use that exploitation to be able to, for example, we have an apples to apples comparison. We can see one of the biggest socialist policies in the history of this country was PPP loans and the loans that were given out to businesses that were interest free. And we could see what the value of that was. It was one of the largest transfers of wealth from the poor and working class to the upper class. If it was all just, well, the Federal Reserve is responsible for everything, then we wouldn't have seen a change in the transfer of wealth rate, because the Federal Reserve basically hasn't changed from 1912 to now, right? The truth is that, yes, there are a lot of problems that stem with this Federal Reserve, and that's something that should be a priori in dealing with. But still, even if you get rid of this Federal Reserve, if you have huge amounts of socialism, that allows the government to pick winners and losers, and it always makes those areas where they have control inefficient and corrupt. That's why we can see things like the VA in the United States, where the government controls health, being so poor. That's why we can see government-controlled health in Canada being so poor. That's why we can see government-controlled health in the UK being so poor.
What do you mean? What do you mean by being poor? I can go see my doctor tomorrow. Canadians, on average, I can literally go see my doctor tomorrow.
Okay.
Right, and if I need, the only thing that kind of fucks you over in Canada,
if you sprain your ankle or something.
Dude, this is some fucking stupid left-wing fucking shit that they pushed. Dude, I can't control
and
that.
It happened.
It happened, and I'll acknowledge that. But it's like, what do I have to subscribe to you everything and all the Biden and all the left wing fucking libtards have been
Your
fucking
argument
pushing? Is that your position?
You are
No,
pointing
it's
out
not my
problems-
position
you
on
are
a lot of
pointing out
things.
Problems in the United States. I'm pointing out problems in Canada. When I point out the problems in Canada, you go, yeah, but that was lefties. I didn't do it. Right? It was the fucking lefty globalists that created the Federal Reserve. I didn't do it. So, then what's your criticism about the Federal Reserve have to do with me? I'm pointing out
No,
the way that the
it's
system
where
runs
we are,
now
where
under
we
the
are
Federal
now, where are we
Right.
going, and what we want to do in the future. And if you're noticing a fucking pattern, you might want to fucking
I'm gonna get
position
back,
yourself
here,
to
I
take
can't be here
advantage
with
of
your
that
rambling-
instead of
I
actually
can't
harming.
be here with your rambling ass all night. So I'll ask you.
It's okay, all
this,
good. I
since-
gotta go put my kid to bed
because
anyways.
you didn't really answer this, right? Because you've tried to be shifty to get out of this, right? You're saying that conservatives will win no matter what in Canada, correct? Whether Trump does these
Sure.
tariffs or not. Okay. You're saying that there's going to inevitably that are I don't know. I didn't get a straight answer, so I guess I'll ask. Do you think that Trump's current stance will accelerate Canada leaving the US dollar as a reserve currency?
Not as a reserve currency, but its actions in terms of producing the pipelines required to get LNG elsewhere. You already have BRICS and more countries joining it. It's a pattern that I've noticed throughout history. If you study history and the flow of fucking how the pendulum swings back and forth.
Anything. Like, all of this is unresponsive to what I'm asking. You're saying, like, look, Trump doing these tariffs is going to be really bad for the United States. Got that part. But you're also saying it'll be bad for Canada. It seemed at first like you were saying it'll be bad for Canada because it's going to
be bad for Canada, and then you're going to get people that have similar fucking positions in you that you're not going to be able to do business with.
It seemed like you were saying it would be bad for Canada because it would affect conservatives' abilities to win the election.
No, I never said that. I never said it would affect our ability to get elected. That is not a position I said.
And then you say, no, that's not what I'm saying. And I'm like, what are you saying? And you're like, well, the United States shoot itself in the foot. And the dollar, the reserve currency, and it's shit. And look what's happened in the United States. Okay, so are you just altruistic? And actually Trump putting these tariffs will help Canada, but it'll just hurt the United States, and you're just, because you're such a good person, you're just warning me? What's the negative effect to Canada going to be?
Honestly, I don't think it will be bad up here. I think fucking that the tariffs and you becoming an enemy probably will end up fucking forcing us to get our shit together. But you're not that in the long run of trying to influence all the countries in the world to maintain. Like I'm trying to put myself in your shoes. I can take myself out of my fucking position.
I appreciate that as a Canadian. I appreciate you telling me what's good for me.
It's okay. It's okay. You can walk over the cliff, brother. There's a waterfall. Don't go over the waterfall. You're gonna go over the waterfall. Fine. I gave you a warning.
For you. Hey man, actually these tariffs will help your country get their shit in order more, and they'll all of a sudden decide that they can't participate with the United States or rely on them as much, so they'll build their own pipelines and do all this shit, and you got every resource that you'd ever need. So actually this is helping Canada get their shit in order. That's why the United States is doing it, because we care about Canada. There you go.
I'll take it. Fuck.
All right, we'll see it.
I wish you a good one, buddy.
Yep, take
Lots
it easy,
of peace,
man.
love, and happiness.
Yep, see ya. I don't know what's going on with the volume issues. That I can't figure out. I don't know if it got better when I changed stuff around. Holy shit. Okay, we're going to go fast with these. Brimstone was here. Then I'm going to get to, we got 5 minutes per person, then I got to go. So Brimstone was here first. Brimstone, can you hear me? I know you're muted right now. Can you hear me, sir? While we're waiting, let's go with, we did that one. John Beer for $2 says, you tariff Vegemite, we tariff Pop-Tarts. It's Vegemite's terrible. Spiro, thank you so much for 20 Canadian. Says, as a Canadian, I'm sorry, Rob. That guy is so bad, he almost made me vote Liberal over here. I'm going to throw down my disappointment, maple syrup, and throw you 50 memberships for putting up with that. And then does gift 50 memberships. Thank you so much. Listen, we're both heated, but I like that dude. I think he's pretty cool. It gets heated, and I like the amount of national pride. You should have that much pride in your country, even if you think things aren't being ran by the best people. And I do tend to agree with them on the the tariffs as far as the idea of these fentanyl tariffs. I don't get it. I talked last night. I just feel that like sort of the way that he was going about that conversation was a bit odd. Oh, Brimstone, can you hear me? Brimstone Todd or Brimstone? What's up?
Yeah, the disagreement I have with you is on the CR.
Okay.
Continue. So I, similar to you, have always hated these omnibus. It was one of the things I criticized Trump about in his first term when he said that he'd only pass it the one time and then he kept doing it.
Okay.
Pisses me off. But what I recognize is the budget really is Congress's job. They just refuse to do it. How I look at it right now is Trump has a limited amount of time and a limited amount of political capital to get things done.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is much more of a priority that he uses his political capital and time to get Congress to codify his EOs in law. That way, if a Democrat gets back in, they can't just make new EOs, overturning everything he did.
Mm-hmm.
And he wastes the political capital and the time he has right now on this fight over the budget. After he runs out of his momentum and his political capital, he can always start vetoing bills until Congress decides to do the damn job.
But a lot of the spending for things like USAID wouldn't be necessary to enshrine the EOs into law, correct?
It depends on how some of these rulings come out when the Supreme Court finally gets off their ass and steps in.
Yeah, but that would seem to be the opposite, right? Because the only potential way those rulings could harm Trump would be saying Trump's not allowed to do that through executive order. Then the only game in town will be, okay, what does Congress fund? So if Congress just says, yeah, we're not going to fund USAID anymore, then the Supreme Court rulings at that point become a moot point because they're not necessary because Congress isn't funding them in the first place. So why wouldn't Congress do that?
Because they suck at their job and aren't accountable to anything.
That's completely right. And so 2 more points to make of this. Let's play this through. We're already seeing one of the things that may happen. I think a government shutdown would be fine because what a government shutdown would show is exemplifying what Doge is saying. Just like we saw with X that there were so many employees that weren't necessary, that's true of the federal government. Probably 80 to 90% of the people that work at our federal government aren't doing things that are necessary for the average person to have day-to-day functions that the government's doing. There's so much bloat, there's so much fraud, there's so much waste, etc. Right? So if the government shuts down, that's going to look really bad for the people that are saying, actually, we need the government operating. Now, in a government shutdown, they'll probably do things like fund WIC, fund programs that would benefit, health, etc. For people. But you'll see that many of these other programs are unnecessary. So right now, Chuck Schumer's saying, well, we're not going to vote for this. If that's the case, they're going to vote for some form of it because if there's a government shutdown, they're going to have to eat that. And that ultimately will be sort of a Doge-esque policy anyways. So given that, why not make it even more likely that Democrats will vote against it by just saying, yeah, we're not going to fund USAID. And the reason for that is because the truth is so many Republicans get kickbacks from that shit too. So they don't want to stop funding it. But unfortunately, that goes against your central argument, which is that 6 months later, that we'll start to see, it'll be different 6 months from now. And the other thing I'll say about that, and then I'll give you a chance to respond. By the way, I apologize for the microphone issues to everyone. I don't know what's going on here. I've tried everything, as you've seen. I've switched microphones. I got to figure something out here with StreamYard. It's given me these problems before. So again, I'm trying real hard as we're going on here to... I'll up my mic volume some here. We'll see if that has any effect. But anyways, I hope it's listenable. Anywho, I'll finish with this. It would be different if we didn't see Trump's first term. This was the same argument that we heard in Trump's first term every time. Well, you just got to expand the budget this time. Trust me, we'll get to it next time. Then a year later, it was, okay, listen to me. This one time, it's important. We'll get to it next time. And then a year later, it was, this time, it's really important. We'll get to it next time. And then it was, well, it's an election year. We can't afford to cut spending like that or we'll lose the election. We'll get to it next time. And we always seem to never get to it. We're always told, trust us, next time we'll be able to cut the budget. And it never seems to occur. So why should I believe that it'll be different next time? It's still going to be the same Republicans in Congress that don't want to cut it. There's still going to be important issues that Trump says, look, now's a key time in my presidency, 9 months in. So where's your confidence that this will be different 6 months from now?
Well, I'm not fully confident that it will. In previous times, I literally was cheering for indefinite government shutdowns. The problem is, for most people, perception is reality. And I can't tell you how many Trump supporters I had to argue with that shutting down was not a bad thing previously. And I know that you understand that if it shuts down, Democrats are better at messaging on this. They will blame, will lose some support.
That's true.
He might not.
You're right about that. They are better. You know, ultimately, I'll just say this, and then I got to let you go because there's two more people, and I have to get out of here by 10:30, or at least right around 10:30. But tomorrow I'll be streaming. You can call in and talk about it again. I'll just say this: like, you're right about the messaging thing, but at some point you can't let that be the end all be all. Well, we have to keep funding this shit that's antithetical to the United States, like USAID, and it's used to bolster liberal and left wing groups because Democrats are better at messaging. If we get rid of it, I'm sorry, now fuck that. At some point, you just have to rip the Band-Aid and say, sorry, that's what we're doing with the Department of Education. Why wouldn't we do it with USAID? And the truth is, there is a solid argument to be had, and Democrats are going to win this argument, and you're going to see people like me trying ineffectively to push back because it's a very good argument. Look, if Republicans are really pissed off and really persuaded by all of the fraud and abuse that Doge has found, then why did they vote to fund it all? Again, even after Doge found it. And yet they still voted to fund it. And if I'm a judge, I'm like, that's pretty persuasive because your argument is we need to cut this funding now because it's fraudulent, it's wasteful, blah, blah, blah. And Congress didn't intend this. And then if you're like, yeah, but Your Honor, look, Congress heard what the argument was that it was wasteful and fraudulent, and they said, no, we'll keep funding it anyways. And
I just think the most I just think the most important thing that could get done is judicial reformation. Like, we need to reform the judiciary, and I don't think that's going to happen unless Trump is has maximum political capital and support. And we'll really hope that's what done.
Well, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong, and the future CR will have far less spending. So, thank you so much, Brimstone. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
Take it easy. Green Cloaked, we're moving you in. We're going fast. What's up, Green Cloaked?
G'day.
What's happening?
How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. We got like 5 minutes. What you got?
Well, after my my brother in arms there just spent 30 minutes going ballistic, I figured I'd come in and try to talk a little bit of economical sense regarding tariffs, the situation we're dealing with. I think the situation is generally misunderstood and it has been politicized a little too hard, and the reality of the situation is not quite what it's being sold at. I think there's lots of things to criticize Canada on, don't get me wrong, but I don't think the tariffs are particularly one of them, or the application of the tariffs. So that there is a trade deficit between Canada and the US. I think everybody's tracking that. It was $64 billion in 2023. It's $64 billion again, basically in 2024. So there's definitely a trade deficit. However, that trade deficit is almost entirely, or can be entirely, accounted for in crude oil, right? So, which is a product you guys buy on the Western Canada Select crude discount, where you're paying $13 a barrel cheaper than the market rate. Which is, because we only really have you guys to sell it for, to a degree. Don't get me wrong. It's kind of one of those situations where you've got us a little over the barrel, so we get a discount in doing so, or you get a discount in doing so, where we sell you that crude. So I can't argue that there's a trade imbalance, but I can argue that the trade imbalance is not necessarily something that you should be particularly upset about, if that makes sense.
No, I get it. And I do think that it's oversimplistic to just be like, if there's a trade imbalance, that necessarily means that there's unfair tariffs. God damn, I have trouble here with, there we go. Sorry about that. But I have to look. I'm not going to just take your word for it, and I think that you would understand that. I wouldn't ask you to do the same with me. I do have to look into it more because I know that there are certain things that there are high tariffs from Canada on exportation from the United States. But I would assume that there's probably things in the United States that are high tariffs on goods that are coming from Canada, would be my guess. The problem
So,
is when
for
you're
example-
talking about tariff. Well, let me finish real quick. When you're talking about tariffs, it's almost never a one-to-one. Like, it doesn't make sense because generally two countries aren't importing and exporting the exact same good in the same numbers. For example, you talk about crude oil. Like, Canada's not going to take the exact same barrels of crude oil in from the United States as they're exporting out from the United States. That's just intuitively true. We all understand that. So it's very difficult to put a dollar amount on, like, well, how much of our goods by the dollar are tariffed by Canada versus how much of their goods by the dollar. It's difficult because it's never going to be completely apples to apples. So that I do understand.
I 100% agree. And the thing, the problem I think I have the most with it is when we negotiated the first USMCA under Trump, we made like, you guys tariffed us on steel and aluminum at 10%, which, is not a high tariff, but it's a significant tariff, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Much the same, you tax us on like softwood lumber. You also tax us on dairy, like poultry, like, and then in return we tariff you on things like dairy, poultry and eggs, grain products, etc. And sometimes these tariffs come into play where, like, I think poultry and eggs, there's at least slightly relevant. But in other places like dairy, for example, they're quota based, so that they just don't come into play at all.
Well,
and
But you understand, like, you heard me say, like, the explanation of that, right? Because the United States companies know to not even send past the quota because the tariffs would kick
so
in.
my understanding for dairy, for example, is that the U.S. exports $600 million worth of dairy to Canada, and Canada exports $150 million of dairy to the U.S., and we have different dairy standards to begin with. So it's not even necessarily a true one-to-one.
So, I'm sorry, you cut out there in the last part. I heard you
So
say true
just what I'm saying
one-to-one,
is, yeah, so that was kind of the end. Like, so the products we sell are not even necessarily the same because the dairy standard is different in Canada than it is on US. But much the same, every time there's a Canadian tariff on a US good, usually there's a corresponding US tariff on a Canadian good in a different sector that was negotiated within the USMCA.
So again,
we sat down and we had this agreement like 4 or 5 years ago.
But I don't think that that's responsive to my criticism, because I think intuitively Canada wouldn't have tariffs that were completely irrelevant, right? I don't think Canada would have these 200% tariffs if they were like, well, they actually do absolutely nothing, because it just so happens the United States exporters are exporting right up into that tariff barrier. But even if these tariffs weren't here, they wouldn't export more. I don't think that's the case.
My understanding is that we don't come close to the quota, but you're absolutely right in that those quotas cause a ripple effect. I'm not sure exactly how to word it, where if you say that if you hit $1 trillion of this dairy export, then it's obviously going to go insane in the tariffing and make it uncompetitive. Then yeah, you're not going to push that hard. I think there is a reality that it's fair, though, for Canada to want to protect some of its own homegrown industry when it comes to, especially to food production, as that is a national security thing, right?
Well,
much the same as I don't think the U.S. current tariffs on steel and aluminum that have been there for 5 or 6 years, I don't think that's unfair if you're going to make the argument that steel and aluminum is a national security concern, which I think is probably real, right?
I think ideally what you would like to see is a world without tariffs. If you're looking at it through, like, forget that you're a member of Canada or you're in the country of Canada, citizen of Canada, I'm a citizen of the United States. Like, if you're just like playing Civilization or something, right? You'd be like, yeah, no tariffs anywhere because this country that has these 3 things that they export at best should be able to win in those markets. But but in the fact that we're never going to get a world that's totally like that, right? Well, then the alternative is, well, you got to protect certain industries, right? Like, you don't want your farming to collapse because there's just no need for it, because you could import cheaper food from the United States, because then that's such an important market.
Well, and then the other factor comes in, which has caused so much issue with softwood lumber and dairy and other things, is when the U.S., for example, in some areas subsidizes their industry, and we don't subsidize that industry. We can't compete with the subsidized industry.
And that's another part of the equation, that subsidies have the inverse effect of tariffs, right? Like if you're looking at it through purely a business from one of these countries. So let's say we're looking at it purely from Canadian business perspective. On one hand, you would say clearly, like, let's say you're shipping aluminum, and you would say, hey, a 10% tariff from the United States on our aluminum hurts our business because it makes us less likely to compete with U.S. aluminum industries because they're going to be able to undercut us because we have to pay this 10% tariff. right?
Yeah.
But a subsidy of 10% basically has the exact effect on that Canadian company, right? Because they're still the U.S. company that's being subsidized at 10% is still going to be able to undercut you, right? So it
100%, yeah.
it is something that people don't look at in this conversation, which is subsidies. Then there's other things that can have effects, right, that make this conversation much more complicated, such as there could be specific, how do I put this? Specific things that are mandated with safety or other things of a certain product that make products that come in from exporters non-viable in your country. So let's, for example, say that I'm not saying this is the case.
Dairy, for example.
Right. Let's say that we said all dairies have to be from non-GMO, or they couldn't have certain vaccine that we know is, cows are given in the United States. That harms the United States exporter because now they've artificially been put out of the market because something they're doing with their dairy isn't allowed there. That also could affect, it has the similar effect of a tariff or a subsidy, which is, artificially increasing the domestic producer's ability to undercut the exporter. So it makes a very difficult conversation. This is one of the things, the idea of reciprocal tariffs, I don't have a problem with. The problem is Trump hasn't began to explain in each specific incident because he's talking about reciprocal tariffs across the globe, right? Well, each country is a unique story. And so it's
well, every relationship is complex, and there's specific markets and specific products that we want to protect and that you want to protect, and you want this national security industry protected, and we want this national security industry protected. And there's all of these hyper complex relationships. And a lot of this has already been, as I say, negotiated 5 years ago in the first Trump USMCA, right? So the problem, I think, that really hits on this one is that a lot of the high tariffs like dairy and poultry and eggs, etc., are being treated as if these are, Canada taking hyper advantage of the US when it's not really been that situation. This is the deal that Trump agreed to the first time. And I think if you want to criticize Canada, there is no shortage of things to criticize us on. I think the tariffs and dairy tariffs are just not correct.
My guess is this is what's happening. Unlike the other caller, right? Canada is in a weaker position than the United States. Like they 100%. Need the United States. Like that caller's just full of it. Though I know we're going back and forth. It makes for a good show. I enjoy it and I appreciate the passion. Everyone should be so passionate about their own country. I know I am about the United States, right? I think, if I'm honest, this is what Trump's doing. I think Trump wants to get rid of the income tax and wants to be tariff exclusive. And I think that he realizes that the United States is gradually going to lose its economic influence across the globe for all sorts of reasons. And so now is a critical time to use that leverage and to be like, listen, we're going to have tariffs. Other countries are going to just have to deal with it because our market's still so important to them. And we'll transition away from sort of the world reserve currency type thing that we're currently doing, exporting finance. And we're going to use these tariffs to not only bring in tax revenue, but more importantly, bring back manufacturing to the United States. Because a bunch of companies, not so much like farming and things like that, but a bunch of companies like chip manufacturers or automobile manufacturers, et cetera, are going to realize, look, the U.S. marketplace is so important to us. And if we're undercut by companies that are producing and manufacturing in the United States, then we're going to get ahead of the game and we're going to start producing and manufacturing in the United States. I think that's the gamble that Trump's making.
I think that makes logical sense.
And he's not going to say it like that, though, right? He's going to say, well, these countries screw us over, so we're fighting back.
Yeah, well, that's the problem, right? Is like I agree that plan makes logical sense looking at through a Trump lens. The problem is I don't think he anticipated that everyone would just not accept it and play. Every time he put a tariff down, people are putting a tariff down, and it's creating an incredible cycle of bad news plus economic turbulence. Let's say.
I don't know how bad it will be in the United States. I think long term it would be bad. But I think most countries will suffer more than the United States, so it becomes a waiting game. And I think
100%.
I think that what Trump's gamble is eventually everyone will sort of save face. Eventually there'll be a compromise to sort of come to the middle. But what the gamble has shown is, listen, the most important thing if you're a global company at this point is thinking, okay, we want predictability, and that's true of business everywhere. More so, like, this is something, and I only know this because it was my number one argument when I debated in college. I studied this so much. Business confidence and business predictability. A business would be fine paying a higher tax rate than they would a tax rate over 10 years that would be lower, but is unpredictable. So let's say you could see in a crystal ball and be like, okay, business, you're going to pay 15% taxes on everything of the next 10 years, right? Or you're going to pay what averages to 13% tax, but the problem is you're never going to know year to year what it's going to be. Year one, it's 10%. Year two, it's 25. Businesses don't like that. They like predictability. And so I think that part of the gamble that Trump's playing is like, listen, if all that matters is what's the biggest market, we're not going to take our chances, because it turns out that a United States president could just be like, okay, tariff. And then all of a sudden we manufacture cell phones, which we're selling primarily to the United States. And now we can't sell them for 4 years because of the president. So what we'll do to be predictable is just move to the United States. I think that's part of Trump's argument. Now, listen, I still don't favor this. If it's used as a bargaining chip and cooler heads prevail and it ends up with a slightly better deal for the United States and it brings manufacturing to the United States, great. But I don't think it's a good idea to go after countries that are allies, like potentially the United States and potentially a conservative administration coming into Canada. And I think, unlike that previous caller, I think that this will harm the conservatives in Canada.
I think, unfortunately, like, despite what the previous caller says, I do not think the conservatives in Canada anymore have a reliable win.
Me neither.
In Canada, like,
and I think
they
these
went from plus 25 to basically even, right?
Right.
And yeah, because it gave the exiting liberal government, who had no pressure to, how would I say this, act normally with Trump, because Justin Trudeau knew he was leaving, so he could be as much of a dick as he wanted to, which plays really well with the public when you're standing up to that bully.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And so it's created a situation where now they're basically even in the polls. I don't know if that's how it will.
Well, and I just as an outsider's perspective, what it looks like is I think a lot of people in Canada were probably looking very similar to the United States, where they're like, dude, our current administration doesn't give a shit about Native Canadians. They don't care. They seem to be more concerned about, bullshit virtue signaling or importing people from around the world, et cetera, et cetera. We want a Canadian government that gives a shit about Canadians, right? And then you've given the one issue to the outgoing government that's like, we're sticking up for you from this bully down the block. Now all of a sudden they look like an administration that gives a shit about Canadians. Fuck this bully. And I understand. Now, I still stand by the argument that I'm making with the previous caller, that I don't think, if it's true that the tariffs are reciprocal, that Trump's suggesting, and that Canada is screwing us over, I don't think that we should not put reciprocal tariffs because it might affect the election in Canada. I think that's a bad argument. I don't
think that argument is actually correct either. Like, I think that anything, if you want to help the actual conservative or the quote unquote conservative party in Canada, it just, like, any tariffing doesn't help them. Like, whether it's any discussion of it basically hurts them, right? So it creates a.
But I don't give a shit about that. I'm just saying.
Yeah, like, that's not your business.
For example, if it was the inverse, if it was like Biden decided to tariff the shit out of Canada, like in 2023, right? And Canada finally gets an election and they're like, okay, we're going to fight back. And I was like, wait, don't, because that could hurt Trump going into this election. You'd probably be like, yeah, I don't give a shit about that. Like,
yeah, and to be clear, I don't expect you to give a shit about it either. Like, my only real, like, core points is, like, I feel like the tariff issue is overblown. I think if you want to criticize Canada, hit us on being like a military freeloader. Hit us on, like, honestly, we don't actually have a bad border, as people like to say. Focus on the issues that are real, which is, like, freeloading and, like,
I just don't think I think I agree with you, and I'm actually glad you called, and it's something that I would like to look more into. Because, again, I'm not just taking your word for it. That's not because I don't trust you. Just because I understand the tariff situation super complicated for all the reasons that we talked about. But one of the criticisms I have of Trump is, particularly when it comes to these fentanyl tariffs, I've been saying it for a while now, like, the lack of specificity is troubling to me. And even on the reciprocal tariffs, the concept makes sense. If you're taking advantage of us, we should do the same thing to you you're doing to us. However, the devil's in the details. How do you know who's taking advantage? Because we're not just talking about Canada, we're talking about every country in the world. And no doubt there are countries taking advantage, but there's probably countries the United States is taking advantage of. So am I just going to take the word for the Trump administration that trust us, whatever we say on each and every country is the correct way? Well, no, if I talk to someone like you that's like, I happen to know a little about the Canadian situation specifically, and I don't think that Trump's representing it accurately, or he's mistaken, or he's blatantly lying, or whatever it is. So
I'm not saying he's blatantly lying. I'm just saying it's getting misconstrued, right? Like, you know, we have a 60 whatever bill trade deficit. Over 100 bill of that is crude oil. You actually buy that crude oil at a discount to begin with, partly because of the quality, but like also because we don't have another real trade partner to sell it to, because we haven't developed the infrastructure, because we love you guys, or we used to love you guys, I guess. But
I love Canada,
you know,
I've been there once. I went to, and I didn't really go to Canada. I went to Niagara Falls, the Canadian side, because I was 19 and I could drink there. And it was funny because I met a bunch of like, let's see, I was 19 and could drink there. Yes, that's the way it goes. But there were a bunch of 18-year-olds leaving Canada to the United States, because I think you have to be 19 to buy cigarettes in Canada, at least you used to. So you have teenagers, teenagers in the United States fleeing the border to drink and fleeing Canada to smoke.
Yeah, and then the 18-year-old Canadians go to Quebec, where you can actually drink at 18. So.
There you go. So and then I did spend a day though. Me and some friends drove up north, because Canada, Niagara Falls is just bullshit touristy shit. I wanted to see like trees and fucking like, you know, rural Canadian people. So we drove like 4 hours north, and it was one of my favorite days that I ever had like vacationing, because we found this little cafe with this like cool little like French chef, and he came out. No one was eating there, and he came out, and we're like, you know, we got like $15 to eat. We figured we'd get eggs and shit. This dude came out and shot the shit with us and just made us shit in the house. This is the first time I ever ate escargot. Dude's making us snails. He's making us like all this French shit. It was amazing. It was the coolest shit. And we talked to like all these people that came in, like, you know, actual Canadians there in the province. So you know, but just an anecdotal story there. But yeah, you know, I don't want to set up an antagonistic relationship with any country. Fuck, I'm even for opening trade with Russia and China and all that. So I think that it's the bravado of Trump. I think that sometimes good, sometimes bad. I understand why he's doing what he's doing. I agree that the middle class and manufacturing in the United States has been gutted. But I don't, you know, I would like to see cooler heads prevail.
I don't disagree with that statement that the middle class has been gutted, but to be clear, like Canadian labor and American labor are basically equivalent. We're dealing with the exact same problems.
I
right?
agree. I agree, and I think that
the average worker here is the same general quality as the American worker.
I unfortunately
nobody's
think
pushing them to Canada.
I think the calculus for Trump, the majority of the calculus is that it's just like, fuck it, Canada needs us more than we need them, so we're going to apply pressure. I mean, I seriously think that's where it's coming from, and it's like, I'm not down with that necessarily. I'm not. I think that there's more to be gained by having a reliable partner, and I think that you know, I don't know. I have mixed feelings because you know
what I would have liked to have seen is for Trump to come in and say, "I'm going to apply heavy tariffs unless you commit $3 billion to the border. You do X, Y, Z. I see X, Y, Z."
Yes, I agree. That's what I said. The lack of specificity is what troubles me, because it sort of looks just like he's looking for like a moral victory, right?
Well, the problem is like when he first announced the tariffs, it was clear he wanted the border done better. So we announced $1 billion to upgrade the border or whatever, and we're like good to go. Next week he's like, "No, you're still getting the tariffs." We're like, "Wait, we did what you wanted."
I feel like if they would have done nothing but blown smoke up Trump's ass, he would have been more happy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's Trump's a very real possibility.
And blah, blah, blah. But instead, it's like, well, we'll try to do something, but we're going to be like, hey, we're looking out for us, number one. That's the job of the Canadian government. I think that pisses Trump off. Like, oh, you didn't genuflect to me? And, you know, I'm not happy with it. I do have to let you go. I promise.
No, I understood
call back
it.
in and talk. But no, I agree. And
if you'd like, I can send you a variety of articles.
Yeah, man, send them to my Discord, and I would enjoy looking at that. I swear I would. But no offense to your fellow Canadian that called in either. I enjoy both of you, so I appreciate it.
Have a beautiful day, brother.
All right, take it easy. All right, last one. We got Mega Max coming in. Mega Max, what's happening?
Hey, nothing much, Rob. How you doing?
Good. You know, I think we've talked before. And
Yes, once.
I was friends with a dude in college that had a similar like Xbox screen name to you, and I'm always expecting it to be him, but he's like a Buddhist hippie. You're certainly not him. So
Oh hell no! Oh god, if I was something like that, I'd have to kill myself for being a poser.
he's a good guy though. He was a hippie
No,
for all the
I'm
wrong reasons. Like he wasn't into like the fun drugs and stuff. It was just kind of like
I'd say that's being the hippie for the right reason, man. The drug stuff, that's like boomer cringe, man.
Oh, not back in college. It wasn't for me. He was into like patchouli and not eating meat. It's like,
Ugh,
Yeah.
God, I can't.
And-
I'm one of
and-
those guys that's like literally, I'd rather destroy the world than
Yeah.
give up eating meat.
listen to Fish all the time, that type of
Oh.
stuff. All right, what you got? I got like 5 minutes. Then I
Yeah.
gotta get out.
My thing is I don't think Tom Homan's going hard enough, far enough,
Agreed.
and fast enough. Like one of the examples is just like as a shot across the bow to the Democrats to really, make them start shitting themselves is literally deport Ilhan Omar. We know she committed immigration fraud. Just do it. Make it public. Do what the FBI did to Roger Stone to her. Grab her at 3 a.m. in the morning. Read her. We know you've committed immigration fraud. Your citizenship has been revoked. You're going back home. Because we know she's one of those paper Americans.
So here's the deal. I do know that, right? But knowing that and being able to prove it are two different things. Now, I think the proof is there, and I think they'd be able to. But you have to do something like that, you have to have your ducks in a row. Like, you can't just slap shot that. You got to have
I
the
very much
smoking
agree
gun.
that it has to be done all correct. Like, we have to have all our I's and T's dotted
Right.
and slashed.
But I don't disagree. Like, I think that, no one's above the law, right? We've learned that.
Not only is no one above the law, she's one of those people that's like an open subversive.
Well, you could be an open subversive if you're a U.S. citizen. But if
Yes,
you gamed the system, right, and you lied, then yeah, I think now there's two ways to look at this. Certainly, I think that sends a strong signal that we're not pissing around, right? Like, I think there's much better ways to do that because I think ultimately Ilhan Omar isn't the most egregious person. I would put that for people like James Comey and people that were at the FBI and people that, and I think that if you're going, so there is political considerations afoot. If you shoot your shot with that first, it's going to look bad to a large section of this country. Even if you were able to make the case in a court to prove that she lied about.
Part of it is we have to make the moral argument of we will not suffer paper Americans anymore.
I agree, but we're not
going to deal with these sorts. We're not going to welcome in people who are just going to be leeches on our system.
I don't disagree.
She's one of those for Somalia.
I don't disagree. However, what I'll say is that seems like a year 3 project, right? As opposed to like 50 days in, because what happens is. It sucks to have to look
criticism,
at it.
I would say.
It sucks to have to look at it this way, but you do have to factor in sort of like your political capital. And what's going to happen is if you do that, like in your first 60 days, like there's going to be a large swath of people that maybe formerly voted Democrat and then ended up voting Trump that are going to be like, what the fuck? Right? Like, what just happened? And people like me and you might be like, based. Look at the evidence.
Something based, guys.
But I understand it. I think that instead what you do is, this is why like it's disappointing with things like, I think that Tom Homan's going slow for various other reasons as well, not just that. Or on various other issues, not various other reasons. But like, this is why like coming through in your promises with the JFK files and the Epstein files, all of that's so important. The cognitive dissonance for so many people in this country that don't understand how great the corruption is from all sorts of people in our establishment. Like the ways you start to break through it is by following through on promises like that. Epstein is something that's easy to understand, where it's like, look, we get it. Or JFK, it's something that's easy to understand. If you could say like, look, these people that you venerated as beyond reproach, as they're the establishment people that need to have the power because they're the do-gooders and they're smart. Look at how they're connected to JFK. Look at how they're connected to Epstein. Then you start to sort of create fractures and fissures there that allow you to go further. Now look what James Comey did when it came to sort of the Russiagate investigation.
You talking to that one guy about like, and just walking him through it step by step by step was some of the most agonizing of like a debate to watch. It was like that 18-year-old kid that
Yeah.
called in, because it was just like, it was so blatantly obvious. It's like, this is obviously corruption. If a Republican did this to a Democrat, you'd be able to tell instantly off the bat without having like to lay it out like A to B to C to D to E to F that yes, this is obviously corrupt and BS. Just off of the 2-tier standard that we're dealing with here. Like with that one guy who got, the only reason he got arrested for anything was because there was a BS investigation opened for him. I forget what his name was, but he was like some lawyer guy for the Trump campaign. Got caught for doing weird stuff with the Ukrainians. How ironic.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's all like, if you look at it in the grand scheme of things, it's always, the way they want to look at it is under a microscope, each specific incident, and technically, is the FBI allowed to legally do this stuff? Well, yeah, the FBI could know that you've robbed a bank and choose not to charge you. That's within their purview. There's nothing that says you must charge these people, right? And so you could say, okay, they decided not to charge that person. And then when it's like, but here's a far less crime on the other side, they decided to charge. Well, that's within their purview. The problem is, if you take a step back and look at the broad picture, it becomes evident at what's occurring. Every single time when it's the people against Trump, it's as easy as touch as possible, giving everyone immunity, blah, 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 trying to give sweetheart deals, only going after people when their hand is forced. Then when it comes to Trump, it's go after them as hard as possible, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, you try to explain
when
this.
Their hand is forced, they still try to find a way to get out of it, like with Hunter Biden.
Their appeals to it, they rely on the appeals to the institutions and authority. They'll just be like, you heard earlier when I was talking to that guy, HN. What did he say? Well, then if it was true that, you know, about PTSD from police officers who had their precinct burnt down, why haven't Republicans looked into it and showed a report? That's always what they come to, right? When I used to debate Destiny all the time, one of the arguments that he would make so often, and I hear this argument all the time, like people took this argument, I don't know, from him, or if it's just like, they'll be like, well, if it's true that Democrats are corrupt, then they would have been more corrupt. They would have never let Trump win if they're corrupt, or they would have done more if they're corrupt. And it's like,
that's more an argument of, oh, my side's incompetent. Well, they just weren't competent enough.
Right.
Basically.
They would have never got caught if they really were corrupt. Right. And it's such a bullshit. Then you can make the same argument about Trump. Well, he's clearly not corrupt because he would have done even more if he was corrupt. Right.
Not only that, we would have never heard anything about it, sort of thing.
It's nonsensical. But yeah, it becomes painstaking to walk people through it all the time. And it's just like today when you talk about
it's like when you're walking them through it, it's like you have to force them to acknowledge it. It's like they're like, oh, okay, I'll try and take a little bite off of this thing. Okay, maybe that was a little sus. And it's just like, dude, come on. Why are you being like this? It's like pulling teeth.
And you know, just today you saw it. You know, the bulk of the show today was about, what's the title? Lefties will get more violent, right? We're talking about the Tesla stuff. And right out of the gate, the one lefty that's in the chat that's like talking is like, how could you even talk about left-wing violence after January 6th? Like right out of the gate. Like, that's
right out of the gate, and he barely knew anything about it.
So then
didn't know about the pipe bomb.
You have to like painstakingly go through. He's like, there was more violence on January 6th than all of the Black Lives Matter protests. It's just objectively false. No, you could
just
make
off
the
the time frame it would be objectively
right.
false.
I mean, if you just said that, right,
all across America,
hundreds versus
months.
one. Right. And so it's like, now you could make an argument. Yeah, but January 6th was more impactful than all of those. I think that's a bad argument, but to just straight up say, quantifying, right? When it comes to quantity, there was more people hurt January 6th than all of the months of Black Lives Matter. It's laughable. Yeah. And so then you have to walk through it, and then they'll reposition, they'll move the goalposts, and then you just go through it again and again. And when it comes down to is just basically, yeah, I don't give a shit. And that's the truth of it. Of so much of it.
It's just Orange Man bad.
Well,
at the end of the
Orange
day,
Man bad,
Orange Man
and
bad,
my side's good.
Right wing bad. Or
Black Lives
bad,
Matter was fighting for racial injustice. This is a racist country. And so, yes, some eggs may have been broken, but ultimately it was a good cause. And Trump's evil Hitler that was trying to steal democracy, so ultimately a bad cause.
Yeah.
Therefore, everyone... And it's like, well, that shit's subjective. I think Black Lives
It's-
Matter wasn't a good cause. I think that it was causing racial division at a time in this country where they were being given
And not
special
only-
privileges that the rest of us were told we had to lock down. I think
Not
it was
only did it
terrible.
create- Not only did it create that stuff, but it was also the impetus for making so many things worse.
Yes.
Like that's what really helped DEI go off the handle. We got all these asshole academics going around shilling their racist shit. Like whatever his real name is of Ibram X. Kendi. You need that's one of the things we need to do is we need to stop calling these people by their fake African name sort of thing that they give themselves. It's like, no, we're calling you by your quote unquote slave name.
I don't even know what his
It's
real
like
name
Robin
is, though.
D'Angelo. Yeah, we'll have to look it up, sort of thing. But
Well,
it's
hey,
like,
man, I gotta-
Robin D'Angelo. Yeah, I know, I got you.
I got to
It's-
get
it's
going,
that
but I
late
appreciate it. I'll be streaming tomorrow around 7 p.m., so anyone could call in. if they
time.
want.
I'll be out of town during that time.
All right. Well, Friday it's going to be an early show, like 9 a.m. Eastern. So I'll be taking call-ins then too. So.
Oh, I won't be able to do that either. I'm working then.
What are you doing? You just become a lefty. Sit on the couch. Live in your mom's basement.
Oh,
What the
that would
fuck?
be so easy.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I hate Hassan for. If there's anything, if there was one thing I'd do, I'd take Hassan's citizenship and deport him back to Turkey and have him be dealt with for like looking like a gay.
Poor Hassan. Yeah.
Oh,
well, you know,
poor
the
Hassan.
chicks dig
You
it,
would-
I guess.
Yeah, but it's like those are the really vapid chicks. Or
Yeah, I know.
They're sort of they're the chicks that if you knew them, you'd think lesser for them. Like Lauren Southern. I think lesser for Lauren Southern, knowing that she probably had sex with Destiny.
I think it's not probably at this point. I think it's all but it confirmed.
It's all but confirmed, and that's really,
It is
really embarrassing.
All right, man. I'll let you go. We'll talk soon.
Yep. See you, man.
All right. Take it easy. All right. All right. I got to get going. I'm supposed to be downstairs a while ago. So here's why it's important tonight that I screwed up and went way longer than I was supposed to. I told my wife an hour and a half. I've now been streaming 3.5 hours because I got a lot of cleaning to do before the furniture delivery gets here tomorrow. So now I'm going to have to go downstairs and like scrub the floor or anything. Or maybe my wife did it all and then I'll really be in trouble though. But it's fun stream. I know I went at it with the Canadian guy. It was fun. No hard feelings at all. No hard feelings to anyone, even HN. Everyone who calls in deserves some measure of respect because I know it could be difficult to call in. It could be abrasive. So I thought it was a lot of fun tonight. I enjoyed it. I think these calls, the shows where there's calls, I have more fun with. The audio issues, I don't know. Let me ask you real quick. Was the audio better in the last few? Yeah, Emily, call in tomorrow night. We could talk about, HN called in. Was the audio better in the last few calls? Does like my audio sound good now? I hope. I don't know what it is. It's one little, I like StreamYards a lot, but it's one little kink that I need to work out. Last chatter was good. Okay. I don't know. We'll get something figured out here. I don't know what's going on with it, but anyways, we need 2 Chinese commies calling. It's their audio. They're way louder. Okay. Okay, I'll see what I could do then. We'll see if I could level that out. But all right, thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate it. Thank you. Special shout out. I know I barely said anything to Spiro Floro. I can never pronounce your last name, Spiro. I'm so sorry, Spiro Floropoulos. 50 memberships. You guys are always way too nice to me. You really are. I'm sort of a schmuck. I don't know why people were so nice to me. But I'll take it. I'll take the money. I really will. It really means a lot. It really does. More than you know. So thank you so much for that. Also, I got to say, man, we had upwards of 250 people watching at YouTube at one point. We still have 192. Thumbs up would be appreciated if you like the show. If you didn't like it, give me a thumbs down and talk shit in the comments. That'll help me too. So go ahead and do that. But now you guys are the best. And I really hope that it shows that I'm trying to put more effort into consistently getting videos out every day, trying to live stream as many days that I can, trying to up my production values. I hope that it shows. I really am appreciative of my audience. I think you guys are the best. I think you're the best audience that I've seen. People that'll tell me that I'm a piece of shit and then I'm wrong about certain issues and then the very next day be like, yeah, Based, you're right about that. I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way. So thank you. I hope it's been informative and entertaining. We'll roll her back again tomorrow evening. Who knows what we'll be talking about? Maybe we'll take some call-ins after the first hour. Yeah, I will jump on Nish to the Crucible Discord sometime. I used to do that. If I ever get free time, I'll do it again. I also want to work with the Crucible more coming up here. I know Jake Rattlesnake and Andrew. I'd like to definitely talk. I'm not canceling anyone. So, all right. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate y'all. Let's see if I can figure out this my little closing here. I got to make new banners and stuff. We'll get to all that though. So, you guys are awesome. We'll see you tomorrow around 7. As always, have a good one.